Chapter 2261. The Middle-Aged Man was the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. Why? You're at the primordial realm? The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan stared at Jianshun with wide eyes as his expression changed rapidly. He became uncertain. My cultivation level isn't important. What's important is that you probably don't have the ability to kill me, Jianshun said coldly. Jianshun said coldly. He hovered in the sky as sword chi radiated from him. Dazzling, silver-white light enveloped him, illuminating the surroundings. He seemed like a god that had descended to the mortal world. He extended his finger gently, and the powerful sword intent that belonged to the great perfection of sword spirit permeated the surroundings. It condensed into a strand of golden sword chi in the space before him, shooting towards the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan as a streak of golden light. There was a sliver of black within the golden sword chi. It was the power of chaotic force. The ancestor's expression was extremely ugly. He extended his finger as well, and strands of power of slaughter gathered around him. They formed a chain of laws that collided with the incoming strands of sword chi loudly. With a deafening boom, the two collided. The golden sword chi directly collapsed, turning into countless tiny strands of sword chi that scattered into the surroundings. The chains of laws condensed from the power of slaughter rapidly dimmed as well, but they did not disperse in the end. Instead, they shot towards Jianshun with lingering power. The Daluo sword chi is no longer powerful enough. Jianshun frowned slightly when he saw this. He had already realized that with his chaotic body reaching the 13th layer and his comprehension of the laws of the sword reaching the great perfection of sword spirit, the various sword techniques he knew in the past were basically useless due to the difference in quality. This was because with his current strength, even a casual strike will be far more powerful than the Daluo sword chi. In the end, the Daluo sword chi only possessed the form but not the essence. Jianshun's eyes narrowed, and he gave up on all the sword techniques he knew. With a wave of his sleeve, he sent out a streak of light, dispersing the remaining power of slaughter. Afterwards, he extended his right hand and condensed a 4-meter-long sword from pure sword chi, shooting it towards the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan with lightning speed. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan blocked Jianshun's attacks with a sunken face. He growled, "Young Master Changyang, I was in the wrong this time, but fortunately I didn't make a huge mistake in the end. I hope young Master Changyang can forgive me. I will leave right now. If I hadn't hidden my strength, I'm afraid that I would be a corpse now. Since you want to kill me, I'm destined not to let you go. Between the two of us, only one of us can leave this place alive," Jianshun said coldly. He gave up on all the sword techniques he had grasped and used the most primitive method to attack. The 4-meter-long sword chi gathered in his hand, and he swung it around in an airtight manner. He stabbed out time and time again, moving as fast as lightning, leaving behind blurs. The blurs overlapped one another and were as dense as raindrops. At that moment, Jianshun's attacks could be described as a storm. "Young Master Changyang, are we really not going to let this go peacefully?" The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan said sternly. Although young Master Changyang's strength had completely exceeded his expectations, he could already tell that young Master Changyang was still slightly weaker than him. If he used his full strength and paid a certain price, it was not impossible for him to kill young Master Changyang here. Moreover, this was his miniature world. As long as the miniature world remained intact, he did not have to worry about young Master Changyang escaping at all. This was because his miniature world was rather special. Many methods of escape would be useless here. If my strength was really only that of a divine king, would you have left me alive? It's impossible for you to get away with this, Jianshun said coldly. Killing intent surged from him as his presence surged. He attacked with his full strength without holding back at all. Jianshun had gained a rough understanding of his strength now. The 13th layer of the chaotic body did indeed give him the right to fight primordial realm experts. The only thing he lacked was his comprehension of laws. His comprehension of laws was still at the level of late overgod, while his comprehension of the laws of the sword was equivalent to the level of a divine king. In a clash of laws, he was not the opponent of the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan at all. It was all because of the great battle prowess bestowed upon him by his chaotic force that he was able to close the gap between him and a primordial realm expert. If that's the case, don't blame me. A vicious light flashed through the eyes of the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. Terrifying energy erupted from his body like a tsunami as primordial realm laws constantly descended from outer space. He formed a seal with one hand. Every single movement and change seemed to conform to the truths of the world, possessing the mysteries of the ways. It seemed to cause the world to change. Of devastation. Suddenly, the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan bellowed out. He directly struck out with a palm strike that contained the mysteries of the infinite mysteries towards Jianshan. Immediately, the terrifying energy and power of laws that gathered around the ancestor rapidly condensed into a huge hand. It struck towards Jianshan with a tremendous pressure that seemed to originate from the world. The miniature world shook violently. Space distorted, blurring everything. The entire space surged like water, becoming filled with spatial ripples. The palm strike was just too powerful. It seemed like the miniature world had reached its limit. A god-tier battle skill. Jinshan's face changed, and he became extremely stern. This was a god-tier battle skill used by a primordial realm expert. It could unleash the full power of a god-tier battle skill, unlike the supreme divine king from the Azure Poseidon Palace. Whether it was a god artifact or a god-tier battle skill, they could only unleash a tiny portion of their power. Even though Jianshan had broken through to the 13th layer of the chaotic body, he did not dare to be careless against a god-tier battle skill personally cast by the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. He felt a great threat from the god-tier battle skill before him. With a flip of his hand, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways appeared in Jinshan's hand. Chaotic force surged within him, pouring into the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, causing it to erupt with blinding light. Endless starlight expanded, shining like stars. Huge stars conjured from the sword one after another. 1 star, 2 stars. 6 stars appeared. With each additional star, the pressure from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways grew stronger as well. Only after 6 stars had appeared did it stop. At this moment, the pressure from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways was extremely terrifying. It was no weaker than the god-tier battle skill used by the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. A god artifact. The ancestor's face changed slightly when he sensed the shocking pressure from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. He actually felt envy from the bottom of his heart. God artifacts were extremely precious in the Saints' world. Even many primordial realm experts did not possess one. Although the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan was a primordial realm expert, one of the few sovereigns in the Thousand Leaf Empire, he did not possess a god artifact either. Jianshan swung down with a 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand, and terrifying energy erupted like a tsunami. Starlight scattered down, colliding with the ancestor's apocalyptic palm. P.S. Xiaoyao owes another chapter. Originally, he planned on writing 2 chapters at the very least, but ever since he woke up today, he's been sleepy for an entire day. He can't find the energy to write it all, so he's only written this chapter now. I think it's because of the aftereffects of staying up late a few days ago. Chapter 2262. Boom! With a great boom, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways clashed violently with the great palm of obliteration with its sharp sword chi and dazzling starlight. This was an intense clash between 2 primordial realm experts. The extremely powerful chaotic force clashed with a god-tier battle skill, resulting in the most violent of explosions. The laws of the sword and the laws of slaughter intertwined as chaotic force clashed with origin energy. It was like the most resplendent fireworks in the world, surging with majestic power. The violent ripples of energy shook the space and created layers of ripples. With a destructive force, they pressed down on the miniature world and wreaked havoc in all directions. Jianshan was constantly pushed back by the violent ripples of energy. He protected himself with light as he shone brightly. He pushed the defenses of his chaotic force to the limit to protect himself. He constantly swung the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand. Every strike was filled with resplendent starlight, splitting the incoming ripples of energy. On the other side, the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan's face sank. He could not help but stagger backwards uncontrollably from the violent ripples of energy. The two of them had used their full strength in the clash this time. They did not hold back at all, so the storm of energy from their full-powered attacks made it difficult for them to stabilize themselves. I never thought young Master Changyang would be so troublesome. The power he uses is actually so strange. It's a strange power that I've never seen or heard of before. Coupled with the god artifact he wields, it's almost impossible for me to kill him. I'll probably only be able to injure him at most, thought the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. At this moment, he began to feel regret. He secretly cursed himself for being careless. He had actually struck out recklessly without investigating his opponent's exact strength. Just when he thought up to there, the ancestor's heart suddenly shivered. His eyes narrowed as he stared ahead sternly. Before him, the destructive storm formed by the violent energy had yet to disperse. Space constantly trembled from the shockwaves, causing his vision to blur. Even with the eyesight of the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan, he was unable to see through it with a single glance. His soul was affected as well. At this moment, a surging sword chi suddenly permeated the surroundings. A dazzling light suddenly appeared in the storm of energy before the ancestor. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways condensed with supreme sword chi, shining brightly. It tore through the storm of energy with a single strike, turning into a streak of white light that stabbed towards the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan with lightning speed. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan's eyes were frigid. His face was cold, and a set of blood-red armor appeared, enveloping him. He also wielded a sword that shone with cold light. The laws of slaughter condensed as he swung it at Jinshan with terrifying energy. Spurt! Jinshan's 9-star sword of heavenly ways pierced through the ancestor's armor in a single stroke. With dense starlight, it stabbed into the ancestor's chest with sharp sword chi and chaotic force, rapidly penetrating deeper. The sharp tip of the sword emerged from the ancestor's back. Droplets of blood that belonged to a primordial realm expert constantly dripped from the tip of the sword. At the same time, the ancestor's sword stabbed into Jinshan's body at basically the same time. Jinshan was emotionless. His eyes were cold as chaotic force circulated wildly within him. Strands of chaotic force surged out from his naiden, rapidly galloping through his body like wild horses. They all gathered towards his wound, fusing with his flesh and bones. He had already pushed the defenses of the 13th layer of the chaotic body to the limit, allowing his body to reach its toughest state. He did not fear any attacks. Coupled with the influx of a vast amount of chaotic force, his wounds, be it his flesh or his ribs, were pushed to their limits. As soon as the ancestor's sword stabbed into Jinshan's chest, he felt a great resistance, making it more and more difficult for his sword to advance through Jinshan's body. In the end, it got stuck between two of Jinshan's ribs, unable to advance any further. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan could not help but gasp. His eyes widened as he stared at Jinshan's chest in disbelief. He was shocked inside. With his knowledge, he naturally knew that Jinshan did not possess any defensive treasures. The reason why his sword could not penetrate any further was because Jinshan's body was just too tough. It was so tough that it was shocking. Just the defense of his body was enough to block the attacks of primordial realm experts. Unless I wield a god artifact or use a god-tier battle skill, it'll be very difficult for me to pose a fatal threat to young Master Changyang. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan was dejected. Jinshan's body was so tough, so how was he supposed to kill him with just a supreme quality saint artifact? Once he failed to kill Jinshan, what awaited him would be the destruction of the Blood Battle clan. Suddenly, the ancestor's face changed. He stared at Jinshan fixedly as he could not help but become excited. He called out, "I know. You're not young Master Changyang at all. Your name is fake, your identity is fake, and even your appearance is fake. You're the Jinshan, wanted by the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King. It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. You're Jinshan. You possess a powerful body, strange and violent strength, the laws of the sword you comprehend, and the god artifact in your hand that shines with starlight. All of these characteristics match the description on the wanted poster. After guessing Jinshan's identity, the gloominess on the ancestor's face vanished. He could not help but laugh aloud. Ha 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 ha, Jinshan, who knows how many people are looking for you in the entire Saints world, but I've actually encountered you here. This is the longing of the heavens for our Blood Battle clan. At this moment, the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan was overjoyed. Young Master Changyang was actually Jinshan. Not only did he no longer need to worry about revenge from the organization behind young Master Changyang, but he only needed to report Jinshan's whereabouts to the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King, and the two of them would owe him a favor. With the favor of the two peak experts, just who would be bold enough to provoke the Blood Battle clan on planet Tianming. At that time, even the high and mighty Star Lord of the Heavenly Underworld Star would have to be polite and courteous to the Blood Battle clan. This was because either the solitary sword ancestor or the Azure Pung King were terrifying figures who could sweep through the entire planet. Chapter 2263. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan was overjoyed. He believed that he was the first person to know about Jinshan's whereabouts. As long as he was the first person to pass news about Jinshan to the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King, destroying the Gus clan would be a piece of cake. Jinshan saw how excited the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan was, which made his killing intense surge. His eyes were cold as he said, "Since I'm bold enough to fight you, I'm not afraid of exposing my identity, as I will never let you leave here alive." Ha 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 ha, Jinshan, you really are arrogant. You actually dare to look down on a primordial realm expert. I'd like to see how you keep me here today, laughed the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. The ancestor of the Blood Battle clan laughed aloud. After learning Jinshan's identity, he was no longer interested in fighting. He immediately retreated, wanting to leave and inform the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King as soon as possible. The solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King were peak experts whose names shook up the Saints world. They possessed extraordinary abilities. Every single warrant they issued contained a simple imprint as a communication method. As long as anyone used the imprint, they would be able to contact the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King immediately, no matter how far away they were. Even though countless people knew about the imprint in the Saints world, none of them dared to contact the solitary sword ancestor or the Azure Pung King casually. This was because both the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King could easily find the person who used the imprint. Once they discovered that they had been tricked, not many people could endure the terrifying consequences. Clearly, the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan knew the imprint as well, as it was just too simple. He could basically tell with a single glance. However, the small world he had set up was indeed quite special, just as he had said. In this small world, not to mention all kinds of escape secret techniques, even communication methods would be ineffective. As a result, he needed to leave the miniature world if he wanted to use the imprint to send out a message through the unique method the solitary sword ancestor had left behind. This little world of yours may be restraining me, but it's also restraining you at the same time. Furthermore, you're already injured, and my power still remains in your body. The longer this drags on, the more serious your injuries will become. I'd like to see how you're going to escape from me. Jinshan sneered. He poured chaotic force endlessly into the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, causing it to shine with dazzling starlight. The 6 huge illusionary stars appeared once again. With a roar, he stabbed out with his full strength. This was a terrifying strike on par with a god-tier battle skill from a primordial realm expert. When the sword stabbed out, the sky roared and the ground shook. The entire space pulsed violently as supreme sword chi permeated the surroundings, forming a great pressure that pressed down on the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. The expression of the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan suddenly changed. His eyes narrowed to the size of a needle. He could sense an extremely great threat from the attack. The threat was so great that it was even greater than what he felt from his old rival, the ancestor of the Gus clan. Moreover, his presence had been locked onto. The sword intent had sealed up the space around him, making it impossible for him to dodge or flee. At this moment, it was already too late for him to use the God-tier battle skill a second time. The origin energy within him surged out violently as the laws of the primordial realm gathered on the supreme quality saint artifact in his hand. He slashed out with his full strength with surging energy. Crack! With a crisp sound, the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan's supreme quality saint artifact was cut to pieces by the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone with extremely bright starlight as it stabbed out with surging chaotic force without slowing down at all. It chopped off the ancestor's entire right arm. The pain of losing his arm made the ancestor's face twitch by an undetectable amount. Blood spurted out from his right arm, drifting through the air like it was raining blood. If it weren't for your god artifact, you definitely wouldn't be my opponent, the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan said viciously. The ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan bellowed viciously. He did not have the support of the chaotic body like Jian Shun, so his battle prowess plummeted after being injured twice. Moreover, he had already lost his vital right arm, so his ability to fight back was becoming weaker and weaker. Moreover, when Jinshin's sword pierced through his body, the pure power of the laws of the sword and the chaotic body remained in his body, rampaging around like a wild horse. He had to use his full strength against Jinshin's attack, so he could not spare any energy to suppress the chaotic energy in his body. As a result, he could only allow it to rampage around, causing his wounds to rapidly worsen. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. The ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan glanced at Jianshun resentfully. He gritted his teeth and retreated in a flash, arriving over 100 kilometers away in a single instance. Afterwards, he swung his left hand, and the space beside him immediately cracked. A space gate to the outside world appeared, and he stepped through it without any hesitation. Oh, just when half of the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan had left the space, the howl of a wolf suddenly rang out. The terrifying sound wave turned into visible ripples, radiating with a desolate feeling that seemed to originate from ancient times. Mixed within it was a vast pressure that reigned above all life. The pressure seemed to originate from the laws of the world. It was extremely vast and extremely shocking. It was enough to make people's souls tremble uncontrollably. At this crucial moment, Jianshin used the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline and produced a shocking howl. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline in his body had constantly absorbed the power of the Essence blood, causing the power of the bloodline in his body to constantly strengthen. Compared to before, it was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. The ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan, who was about to enter the miniature world, suddenly froze. His soul suffered a heavy impact, leaving him stunned on the spot. His eyes became lost for a moment. However, he was a primordial realm expert after all, so he recovered in just a single moment. However, a single moment was enough to decide the outcome of a battle between experts. As soon as the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan returned to his senses, he saw a blinding light. Sword Chi surged as endless starlight poured down, drowning him. Spurt! Before the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan could react, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways had already stabbed into his forehead. It pierced his head, wiping out his soul on the spot. A primordial realm expert had died just like that. The moment the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan died, a ruddy, sagely old man suddenly opened his eyes in an extremely luxurious hall within the depths of the majestic imperial palace in the Thousand Leaf Empire. His deep gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the various obstructions, directly looking at where Jianshin and the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan fought. He was stern. What terrifying wolf howls! There's also the lingering might of a battle between primordial realm experts. Has a primordial realm expert of the Wolf Clan come here and is close to the Imperial City? The old man was Poseidon of the Thousand-Leaf Empire. He was the only primordial realm expert in the imperial family. It was exactly because of his existence that the Thousand-Leaf Empire became one of the many ancient empires on planet Tianming. At the same time, he was an existence that deterred the three other peak organizations in the Thousand-Leaf Empire, preventing them from acting rashly. As he said that, the old man had already stood up and was about to hurry over. Traces of a battle between primordial realm experts had occurred outside the imperial city. This was an extremely important matter to the Thousand-Leaf Empire, so he had to investigate it. After all, there were only 4 primordial realm experts in the entire Thousand-Leaf Empire, including him. Chapter 2264. However, just as the old man was about to leave this extremely luxurious palace, a powerful energy that was so frightening that it shocked him suddenly appeared. It directly ignored the various formations set up outside the palace and directly seeped in, forming a powerful barrier that enveloped the interior of the palace. The old man's face immediately changed drastically when he sensed the terrifying pulses of energy from the barrier. He struggled to maintain his composure as panic appeared on his face. "May I ask how our Thousand-Leaf Empire has offended Senior? Please spare us, Senior." The old man clasped his hands respectfully. The old man immediately clasped his hands respectfully. His heart was filled with panic, thinking that the Thousand-Leaf Dynasty had offended them. "There's nothing for you to do outside. Just stay here." An ethereal voice of an old man came into the hall. "Yes, Senior." At the same time, the primordial realm experts who were cultivating in seclusion in the royal capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire were all roused by the shockwaves outside the city. Just when they were about to leave, they were also trapped by a powerful barrier preventing them from leaving. Outside the royal capital, Jianshan slowly pulled out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways from where he fought the ancestor of the Blood Battle clan. He wiped away the blood on it before stowing it away in his space ring. He looked behind him. A fist-sized, silver-white bead hovered there quietly. It shone with a hazy light, which was quite enchanting. Jianshan knew that the white bead was what formed the miniature world. He immediately took a step forward and grabbed the white bead. Afterwards, he turned around and picked up the ancestor's corpse, planning to leave. This was because the space gate to the miniature world had already been opened when he killed the ancestor. The shockwaves from their battle naturally passed through the gate and spread to the outside world. Even the wolf howl he let out could be clearly heard outside. Soon, people would come to investigate this place, so it was not a place to stay for long. "I never thought you'd actually have the ability to kill a primordial realm expert." However, just when Jianshan was about to move, an old voice rang out from behind him. Serene stood behind Jianshan silently in simple clothes. She concealed her presence, moving like a ghost. She came and went without a trace, such that even Jianshan failed to discover when she had arrived. If it were not for the fact that she had spoken, Jianshan would not even have known that she was standing behind him. "Senior Serene, when did you come?" Jianshan clasped his hands at Serene. Serene looked at Jianshan deeply and said, "Kid, you're an influential figure in the Saints' world, but I just happen to owe you a huge favor. So how can I not keep an eye on you? I know everything you do in the Thousand-Leaf Empire." Even though Su Ran's cultivation had fallen, a starving camel was still larger than a horse. Many of her methods were still incomparable to infinite primes. Jinshan's face became rather unnatural. He suddenly discovered that it was very difficult for him to keep a secret from Su Ran. She was actually able to secretly monitor him without him noticing. Is this why chaotic primes are so terrifying? Jianshan was alarmed. Su Ran looked at the white bead in Jianshan's hand and said, "The bead in your hand is refined from the soul beads of ancient world beasts. Ancient world beasts are an extremely ancient species in the Saints' world, and they are extremely rare. In particular, ancient world beasts are close to extinction in this current age. Every ancient world beast body can nurture a universe and evolve into a real world. The soul bead you took from the ancient world beast body is the most important treasure in every ancient world beast body. It's very valuable. This is because miniature worlds refined from the soul beads of ancient world beasts possess some special abilities. You must have experienced a portion of these special abilities already. Jianshun could not help but study the bead in his hand carefully. He had never thought that the bead would have a background like this. It's just a pity that the soul bead in your hand is of a limited grade, or its value would be immeasurable. Serene sighed with pity. Afterwards, she glanced at the corpse of the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan, and she could not help but become stern. She said, "Let's go. We can't stay on planet Tianming any longer." Jianshun followed Su Ran's gaze and looked at the corpse in his hand seriously. His face immediately became ugly. The ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan was maintaining a strange seal with his left hand. Jianshun was familiar with this seal, as it was on every single wanted poster. It was the same seal used to notify the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Punk King. Clearly, as soon as he opened the entrance to the miniature world and before Jianshun could kill him, he had already begun forming the seal. Although he could tell with a single glance that the ancestor of the Blood Battle Clan had not completed the seal, the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Punk King were both extremely powerful peak experts. No one knew whether an incomplete seal could trigger their senses or not. "Let's go," Jianshun called out and tossed the ancestor's corpse into the Inata Tower. He immediately left with Su Ran as quickly as he could. Within a rather shabby stone hut in a remote region of the imperial capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire, the azure-clothed Qing Yishuan bid farewell to the ugly woman reluctantly. "Big sister Zi Qingsheng, you must wait for me. When I have great strength in the future, I will definitely come to planet Tianming to find you." Qing Yishuan hugged the ugly woman tightly as she spoke with a determined gaze. "Little sister, you can go in peace. Don't worry about elder sister. Don't forget that elder sister is a heavenly deity. Although I can't be considered powerful, I still have the strength to protect myself." Zi Qingcheng spoke. Her heart was filled with bitterness. Naturally, she knew that Qing Yishuan's fate would be no different from ending up in the hands of the Gus clan if she followed young Master Changyang. However, young Master Changyang was an existence that even the Gus clan did not dare to provoke. She was powerless when young Master Changyang extended his claws towards Qing Yishuan. "Enough. Master has already urged me to take you to the teleportation formation immediately. It's time for us to go," said Heya. Afterwards, he took out some divine crystals from his space ring and gave them to Zi Qingsheng before leaving with Qing Yishuan. The solitary sword ancestor sat on a meteor with his eyes closed in outer space extremely far away from planet Tianming. He did not move at all like a statue. The Azure Punk King stood in outer space with his arms crossed outside the meteor. He stared at the starry sky coldly. "My subordinates should be able to find Jianshun's origins very soon. As long as they know which organization Jianshun comes from, I refuse to believe that he won't show himself under the threat of that organization. Even if he abandons the organization behind him, I can still find him. As long as I can find a droplet of blood from someone close to him, I'll be able to use that as a guide to find where he's hiding," the Azure Punk King said coldly. At this moment, the solitary sword ancestor suddenly opened his eyes. His old eyes shone brightly as he stared at the depths of outer space. He said sternly, "Someone has used the hand seal I left behind." Killing intent surged from the Azure Punk King when he heard that, causing the entire space to distort violently. He said coldly, "No one dares to use the communication method we left behind so casually. Since the hand seal has been used, someone must have found Jianshun's traces. Where is he? The hand seal is not complete, but it's directly connected to me. The moment it was used, I sensed the minute changes to the laws of the world." "That place should be planet Tianming," said the solitary sword ancestor. He immediately stood up from the meteor. "I'll be going first." The Azure Punk King transformed into an Azure Pung and moved with great speed. In a flash, he crossed an extremely great distance and vanished into the depths of outer space. The solitary sword ancestor directly sank into the meteor. There was a teleportation formation that could cross planes there. He stood in the center of the teleportation formation and tossed out a pile of 5-colored divine crystals before vanishing. Chapter 2265. Jianshin and Su Ran returned to the imperial capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire as quickly as they could. After calling out to Kea, the three of them immediately made their way to the teleportation formation in the imperial capital. Along the way, Kea also knew that it was extremely likely that Jianshin's whereabouts had been exposed, so he became stern. He also realized the severity of the matter. The three of them said nothing along the way and arrived before the teleportation formation very soon. Heya and Qing Yishuan were already waiting near the teleportation formation. Kea naturally recognized Qing Yishuan with a single glance. He was slightly surprised and glanced at Jianshin. He was extremely surprised. Clearly, she had never thought that she would actually come across an old friend from the Tianyuan continent on planet Tianming. However, Kea and Qing Yishuan did not have much of a relationship back on the Tianyuan continent, so they did not greet each other when they saw each other. Master, Heya arrived before Jianshin with Qing Yishuan and stood behind Jianshin consciously. Where do we go next? Qing Yishuan looked at Su Ran, Jianshin, and Kea. She gently bit her lip and asked softly. She could tell with a single glance that Jianshin, Heya, and Heya were stern. In her eyes, Jianshin was still the young Master Changyang, who came from a large clan and organization. Clearly, something bad had happened for him to act like this, which made Qing Yishuan feel rather uneasy. Jianshin and Kea had already disguised themselves as soon as they set foot on planet Tianming. They hid their true appearances, so Qing Yishuan still did not know their true identities even now. Let's leave here first. You two go into the Divine Hall first, said Jianshin. Jianshin casually took out a Divine Hall and sucked Heya and Qing Yishuan in. Afterwards, he stepped into the teleportation formation with Kea and Su Ran. With a flash, they vanished. When Jianshin and the others disappeared into the teleportation array, the guards guarding the teleportation array immediately began to whisper to each other. It's forbidden to bring people into any spatial treasure when using the transportation formation. This is the rule of the Thousand-Leaf Dynasty. Captain, why didn't we stop them? Should be quiet. These people have far too great of a background. They're not people our Thousand-Leaf Empire dares to provoke. I just received an order from the higher-ups that we can't provoke them no matter what. I think one of them is called Young Master Changyang or something. Young Master Changyang? Who is he? How come I've never heard of it before? The captain said sternly, I don't know who young Master Changyang is either. Anyway, this is an order from above. We only need to carry it out. We don't need to know the reason. The Feng Empire was one of the few eternal empires on planet Tianming. They possessed chaotic primes, so they were so powerful that the Thousand-Leaf Empire could not rival them at all. There were only 4 eternal empires like the Feng Empire on planet Tianming. As for the Feng Empire, it was ranked second among the 4 eternal empires. In a bustling city of the Feng Empire, the teleportation formation on the square flickered with white light from time to time. Basically, cultivators of all shapes and sizes would enter and exit the teleportation formation at all times. At this moment, when the light from one of the teleportation formations vanished, Jianshin, Kea, and Su Ran appeared there as well. There are only 6 known teleportation formations that can cross planes on planet Tianming. 4 of them are controlled by the 4 eternal empires, while the other 2 are controlled by the Star Lord's estate. The teleportation formation of the Feng Empire is located in the imperial capital of the Feng Empire. Su Ran said to Jianshin and Kea in the teleportation formation before taking Kea and Jianshin directly to the imperial capital of the Feng Empire. As soon as the 3 of them arrived in the Feng Empire, a burly, middle-aged man in black robes sat boldly on a throne in a majestic hall in the Star Lord's estate that was extremely distant from the Feng Empire. An extremely powerful, terrifying presence radiated from him as if a terrifying power that could destroy the world was hidden within his burly body. He stood above the heavens and ruled over the fate of all life. This person was the Star Lord of planet Tianming. He was a supreme existence on planet Tianming, ruling over the entire planet. Suddenly, the eyes of the Star Lord suddenly narrowed. He frowned slightly and showed displeasure. He murmured, "The Azure Pung King has sent a message. He actually wants me to seal up the entire planet? Does the Azure Pung King really think he's the sovereign of the Saints' world? He's actually made such an outrageous request of me. Sealing up the entire planet is no small matter. But the Azure Pung King is known for being narrow-minded. Even if it's something very small, he'll hold a grudge for the rest of his life. Whatever, I'll just give him some face. Immediately seal up the entire planet and get the 4 empires to close the teleportation formations," the Star Lord immediately ordered. The Planet Lord immediately ordered. Although he was displeased, he did not dare to offend the Azure Pung King over such a small matter. The Star Lord's orders reached the 4 eternal empires in the shortest amount of time possible. The 4 eternal empires dared not disobey the Star Lord's orders, nor did they dare to slack off. They moved as quickly as they could. Immediately, the protective formations of planet Tianming were activated. No one could leave the planet and fly into outer space, while the teleportation formations of the 4 empires were basically closed at the same time. "Oh no, planet Tianming has been sealed up." Su Ran's face suddenly changed as soon as she arrived in the imperial capital of the Feng Empire. She stared at the sky sternly. Jinshin's face suddenly changed as well when he heard that. He called out, "Go to the teleportation formation." The 3 of them immediately hurried towards the location of the teleportation formation. However, when they arrived there, their expressions were very ugly. Among the teleportation formations in the Feng Empire, the only interplanar teleportation formation had already been shut down. Only the teleportation formations that could only be used on planet Tianming were still usable. Jinshin's heart sank. He had already realized that the sudden sealing up of planet Tianming and the closure of the teleportation formation definitely had something to do with his whereabouts being exposed. We're in trouble now. Once the Solitary Sword Ancestor and the Azure Pung King learn that you're on planet Tianming, I won't be able to shake off the Solitary Sword Ancestor and the Azure Pung King even if I break through the seal of planet Tianming right now and flee to outer space with my speed, even if I'm in my peak condition. Moreover, the Azure Pung King's speed is unrivaled. Across the entire Saints world, there's basically no one who can catch up to him. At the same time, if he wants to pursue someone, it'll be impossible for that person to escape. Su Ran became extremely stern as well. As soon as Su Ran finished speaking, an extremely terrifying presence surged out from the sky above, enveloping the entire heavenly underworld planet. Before the suffocating presence, the space of the entire planet distorted violently. Even the sky was about to collapse. Outside the heavenly underworld star, a gigantic demonic shadow that was not much smaller than the entire heavenly underworld star was quietly approaching. Chapter 2266. The arrival of the Azure Pung King's true body deeply shocked everyone on planet Tianming as his colossal figure descended. At this moment, countless people on the heavenly underworld planet looked up at the sky. They stared at the huge green rock that covered the sky, and they were all dumbfounded. At the same time, all the primordial realm experts in the Feng Empire were alarmed. They all stopped what they were doing and emerged from seclusion. They hovered in the air as they stared at the sky sternly. A few ancient existences that had once shaken up the world and had not appeared for countless years across planet Tianming all awakened from their slumber, rousing from their seclusion. They also hovered high in the sky as they stared at the Azure Pung King sternly. As the publicly acknowledged strongest expert on planet Tianming, the planet Lord of planet Tianming slowly emerged from the majestic Star Lord's estate. He stood outside and stared at the Azure Pung King who had already descended. He frowned and murmured, "The Azure Pung King only sent me a message a moment ago, telling me to seal up planet Tianming, but in just a few seconds he's already arrived outside planet Tianming. His speed is truly terrifying. I just don't understand. With the Azure Pung King's identity, just what is it that has made him so concerned, going as far as to travel such a great distance and personally come to planet Tianming from the Lone Heaven Plain? Don't tell me." Jian Shun, who is wanted by him and the solitary sword ancestor, is on planet Tianming? As he thought, the planet Lord had already taken a step. He passed through space and appeared outside the protective formation like he had teleported. He hovered before the Azure Pung King from afar. The Azure Pung King had not shrunk his body, so the planet Lord really did seem like an ant when he stood before the planet-sized Azure Pung King with his normal human size. Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, may I ask what has made you so angry? There are many prodigies from various places in the Saints' world on planet Tianming. They're all innocent people, so they can't endure the pressure of the Heavenly King. The planet Lord clasped his hands at the Azure Pung King. The planet Lord clasped his hands at the Azure Pung King. He smiled warmly, clearly showing some respect to the Azure Pung King. The Azure Pung King's presence enveloped the entire planet as soon as he arrived. No matter why he had come, this was a provocation to the planet. As the publicly acknowledged master of planet Tianming, the planet Lord was forced to step forward. However, due to the Azure Pung King's strength, he did not dare to offend him. Jian Shun is on planet Tianming. Immediately open the protective formation, the Azure Pung King said. His voice was cold and filled with killing intent. He spoke like he was giving a command, leaving no room for objection. As he spoke, his enormous body rapidly shrunk, once again turning into a middle-aged man in green robes. His face was sickly pale. The Azure Pung King is clearly injured, and his injuries are quite severe. It looks like the rumor of him being injured by the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing is true. The planet Lord was secretly surprised when he saw how haggard the Azure Pung King seemed, but he showed nothing on his face. He immediately opened the protective formation on planet Tianming and sighed emotionally. I never thought that Jianshin, who's currently in the limelight, would actually appear on my tiny planet. However, Jianshin isn't anything special either. It's said that he has close ties with the God Clan, and the little war god of the God Clan seems to be close with Jianshin. He has said that he would protect Jianshin. So many peak organizations in the Saints' world who resent Jianshin gave up on hunting him down. After all, the God Clan was once the greatest clan in the Saints' world. Even though they've declined now, their heritage runs so deep that they can't be underestimated. Moreover, there's a young man called Ming Dong from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. I heard that he seems to have an extraordinary relationship with Jianshin. There are rumors about him everywhere in the Saints' world right now. It's said that he's either the 8th Majesty's disciple or the 1st Majesty's disciple. Sigh, Jianshin's identity really is something else. The planet Lord could not stand the Azure Pung King's condescending attitude, so he brought up Ming Dong. He purposefully mentioned the 8th Majesty and the 1st Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to secretly mock the Azure Pung King. Moreover, he mentioned the God Clan. He was obviously implying that the Azure Pung King was so arrogant that he did not even show any respect to the God Clan. The Azure Pung King glanced at the surnamed Zhou on planet Tianming coldly before directly charging into the planet. It's extremely likely that what you just said will infuriate the Azure Pung King. Aren't you afraid that the Azure Pung King will resent you for doing this? After the Azure Pung King's departure, 6 more figures silently appeared behind the planet Lord. They were of different ages and looked like ordinary people. However, their deep eyes seemed to contain the void of the universe. The Azure Pung King is ordering me around. He's directly giving me orders. He's far too arrogant. We're both Grand Primes. He has dignity, but do we not have it? Considering his strength, we can show him some respect, but there's no need for us to bend our knees. The planet Lord's face sank as well. That's right. The Azure Pung King really is far too arrogant. He doesn't take our planet seriously at all. If it were the solitary sword ancestor, I would naturally have nothing to say, but the Azure Pung King is still not enough to convince me, an old man said emotionlessly. It's the infamous Azure Pung King. We're in trouble now. Su Ran became extremely stern in the Feng Empire. Beside him, Jinshin's face was extremely sunken as well. The light in his eyes flickered as he discussed how to deal with the situation. Kea also showed some uneasiness. He gripped Jinshin's arm tightly as he became extremely nervous. Before the Azure Pung King, all of your disguises are useless. After all, the difference in cultivation between the two of you is just too great. Moreover, the senses of a Grand Prime soul can easily envelop the entire planet, Su Ran said to Jinshin secretly. She also worried for the two of them. Jinshin's heart sank even more when he heard that. If the senses of the soul could envelop the entire planet, no matter what happened on the planet, it would not be able to escape the Azure Pung King's notice. He really had nowhere to hide on the planet. Senior Su Ran, Kea, entered the Divine Hall immediately. Jinshin made up his mind immediately. He did not dare to expose the Inata Tower here, so he could only take out a Divine Hall that would not attract any attention. At the same time, he gripped his last remaining cosmic movement talisman. Now, this was the only way he could think of to escape. However, before Jinshin could take Su Ran and Kea into the Divine Hall, an extremely terrifying senses of the soul flooded out, enveloping the entire planet. Under the envelopment of the senses of the soul, the planet seemed to stop moving. Everything fell silent, and the origin energy froze at that moment. At that moment, all the cultivators below the primordial realm felt like they had been bound by a mysterious power, immobilizing them. This was the terrifying senses of the soul of a Grand Prime. They could easily interfere with the operations of the world and dictate the fate of all life. Oh no! Jinshin sensed that the situation was bad. Under the envelopment of the senses of the soul, a bone-chilling coldness rose up from the bottom of his heart, making him feel like he had been plunged into a cavern of ice. Jinshin, I like to see where you can run off to. No one can save you today. At the same time, a cold voice boomed out. The Azure Pung King appeared silently above the Feng Empire. He stared at Jinshin coldly. Chapter 2267. Jinshin immediately felt an extremely powerful presence lock onto him. The surrounding space seemed to freeze at that moment, crushing down on him in layers. Not only did he feel as heavy as a mountain, making it difficult for him to even take a single step, but he also felt like there was a boulder on his chest, preventing him from breathing. He felt like he was suffocating. A Grand Prime is actually so terrifying. Jinshin was extremely shocked. The Azure Pung King's presence was so powerful that it made him shiver in fear. If it were not for the fact that his chaotic body had reached the 13th layer, making him many times more powerful than before, he probably would not even be able to move a finger before the Azure Pung King's presence. Moreover, he could clearly sense the presence of death from the Azure Pung King. He knew that even though his chaotic body had reached the 13th layer, he was still as insignificant as an ant before the Azure Pung King. I never thought that Jinshin would really be on planet Tianming. The planet Lord hovered in outer space as he stared at Jinshin. He was surprised. Jinshin is done for unless the experts of the God Clan step forward. Jinshin still has a talisman in his hand. It looks like he still wants to flee. Unfortunately, with his strength, it's impossible for him to flee before the Azure Pung King because he won't have the chance to activate the talisman. The little war god of the God Clan has said that he wants to protect Jinshin. I wonder if the Azure Pung King is bold enough to kill Jinshin. I do hope that Jinshin dies to the Azure Pung King, and then I'd like to see how the God Clan reacts. If the God Clan can teach the Azure Pung King a lesson because of this, it'll be a matter of great satisfaction. Beside the planet Lord, the people of various ages looked at Jinshin with interest as well. They all began to discuss with each other. Azure Pung King, with your status, you've actually personally bullied a junior. If news of this spreads, it'll probably damage your reputation. Su Ran said with an ugly expression. Now that the Azure Pung King had personally come, there was nothing she could do to protect Jinshin. The only thing she could do was remind the Azure Pung King to consider his identity. Unfortunately, the Azure Pung King's temperament could not be described with common sense. He did not have these thoughts at all, so Su Ran's words were unable to shake the Azure Pung King's determination to kill Jinshin. Mo Chang was the disciple I value the most. Since his death is related to you, you are one of the main culprits as well. Even if the people of the God Clan intercede for you, they won't be able to save you. The Azure Peng's voice was extremely cold as killing intent surged from him. He directly extended a finger toward Jian Shen's forehead. His finger was a very casual attack, but before it, the world paled in comparison. The ground trembled, and the entire world seemed to lose its color. It was as if his finger had replaced the sky, becoming a will that stood above the heavens. It ruled over everything in the world, making it impossible for people to even think about resisting. Not only did the terrifying killing intent condensed on the finger engulf Jianshan, but even Kea, who stood beside Jianshan, was not spared either. He also became the Azure Peng King's target. Clearly, the Azure Peng King did not plan on sparing even Kea. Jianshan's eyes darted around rapidly as an unprecedented sense of danger filled his heart. It made him shiver. The Azure Peng King's strength was just too terrifying and too powerful. Before the Azure Peng King, he did not even have the chance to activate the Cosmic Movement Talisman. At this critical moment, an extremely damaged tower covered in sword slashes suddenly appeared. Like a shield, it blocked before Jianshan. Boom! The Azure Peng King's fingers struck the damaged tower with unimaginable power, erupting with a deafening boom. A devastating storm of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings, directly shattering space and creating a dense web of cracks. The imperial capital of the Feng Empire was as fragile as tofu before the powerful wave of energy. Countless structures collapsed, and the protective formation around the imperial capital only lasted for a few seconds before shattering loudly. In a single moment, the majestic and prosperous imperial capital of the Feng Empire had been reduced to a horrible state. It had basically been reduced to ruins. The cultivators who moved about in the city suffered heavy casualties. Countless people died, and only a few people with impressive strength managed to survive. The damaged tower was sent flying by the Azure Peng King's finger strike as well. Although Jianshan had completely blocked the Azure Peng King's attack with the toughness of the tower, his organs were still thrown into turmoil by the collision. Many of his bones were broken, and as his vital energy surged, he could not help but vomit blood in the end. As for Kea, he had been protected by Jianshan long ago, so he was fine. The appearance of the damaged tower caused the Azure Peng King's eyes to suddenly narrow. His unperturbed heart could not help but thump at that moment as undisguised joy filled his eyes. The Inata Tower. It's actually the Inata Tower. The Azure Peng King recognized the origins of the damaged tower with a single glance. His cold eyes burned with desire as he temporarily forgot about Jianshan. With a flash, he directly charged toward the Inata Tower. That tower seems to be. At the same time, the Planet Lord's face, which had become ugly due to the Azure Peng King destroying the imperial capital of the Feng Empire, suddenly became stunned. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the damaged tower. Beside the heavenly underworld Star Lord, there were a few top experts of different ages who were almost on the same level as the heavenly underworld Star Lord. Their eyes shone brightly as they stared at the tower without blinking. The Inata Tower. It can't be wrong. It's definitely the Inata Tower. The Inata Tower is the famed treasure of the Inata Grand Prime. It's a renowned god artifact in the Saints' world. There have even been rumors that the Inata Grand Prime's Inata Tower has surpassed supreme quality god artifacts. The Inata Tower has actually appeared with Jianshan. This is unbelievable. Whether it was the Planet Lord or the peak experts beside him, their eyes burned with desire the moment they recognized the Inata Tower. They were extremely tempted. Afterwards, they looked at one another before gritting their teeth and charging towards the Inata Tower. They understood that they would offend the Azure Peng King as soon as they took action. It was extremely likely that they would face the Azure Peng King's endless pursuit in the future. However, the Inata Tower was just too valuable, so valuable that it was enough for them to directly become enemies with the Azure Peng King regardless of the consequences. However, once they obtained the Inata Tower and offered it to the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, it would be a great contribution. It would be so great that even if they asked the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to personally kill the Azure Peng King, it would not be enough. The remaining contribution would be enough for them to exchange for satisfactory benefits from the heavenly palace of Bishing. Although the Planet Lord and the others were nowhere near as fast as the Azure Pung King, they were grand primes after all. The distance between them and Jianshan was nothing to them. With a single step, they appeared around the Inata Tower. "You're looking to die." The Azure Pung King's killing intent surged when he saw how the Planet Lord and the others dared to steal from him. He no longer cared about Jianshan anymore. With a cold bellow, he directly attacked the Planet Lord and the others. In his eyes, Jianshan was only an insignificant figure. Even if there were 100 Jianshan or 1,000 Jianshan, they were nowhere near as tempting as the Inata Tower. As a result, he placed his main target on the Inata Tower. It was also at this moment that Jianshan finally had enough time to activate the cosmic movement talisman in his hand. He did not have the time to get Kea into the Inata Tower either. As a race against time, he directly wrapped his left arm around Kea's slender waist and grabbed the shrunken Inata Tower. He vanished under the effects of the cosmic movement talisman. "Humph, do you think you can escape from me?" The Azure Pung King sneered when he saw Jianshan flee. He extended his hand, and a droplet of blood immediately drifted over from afar, hovering in his hand. The droplet of blood was Jianshan's chaotic blood. "You will pay a heavy price for your foolishness today." The Azure Pung King coldly glanced at the Planet Lord and the others with ugly expressions before looking at the droplet of blood in his hand. An excited smile appeared on his face. "As long as I have this droplet of blood, I can easily find you even if you flee to the ends of the world." With that, the Azure Pung King immediately shot off into the distance. He used extreme speed and vanished into outer space. Su Ren hovered in the air above the ruins of the Feng Empire in a rather horrible shape. She thought, the Inata Tower has been exposed. We're in trouble now, and the Azure Pung King already has a droplet of Jianshan's blood. If he uses a secret technique and uses the blood as a guide, he'll be able to find Jianshan effortlessly. It'll be very difficult for Jianshan to escape. Even if he hides in the Inata Tower, he'll leave behind traces. It looks like I can only go to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Even though I don't like that place very much, that's the only way I can save Jianshan from the Azure Pung King. P.S. Do you want to see pictures of Jianshan's characters? Do you want to see pictures of Yu and Qing Yishuan? Xiaoyao has already released pictures of some of his characters on his public account. If you want to see the pictures, please follow Xiaoyao's public account on WeChat, Xingxingxiao110. In simpler terms, it was Xiaoyao's pen name and a police number. After following the public account and checking the history, they would be able to see the pictures of these characters. Chapter 2268. After making up her mind, Su Ren immediately left. The Feng Empire had already been reduced to ruins. Even the Imperial Palace was not spared. Naturally, the teleportation formation cast down there had been destroyed as well. She wanted to hurry to a second Eternal Empire and use the teleportation formation there. Only then would she be able to reach the heavenly palace of Bishing faster. That's great. We made a huge mess. Not only will we be hunted down endlessly by the Azure Pung King, but even our clans will be affected as well. The Heavenly Underworld Star's top experts and the Heavenly Underworld Star's Star Master gathered together. They had truly gone for wool this time. Not only had they failed to steal the Inata Tower, but they had even offended the Azure Pung King. Since Jianshan has fled with the Inata Tower, it's pointless for us to continue chasing after him, let alone the fact that we can't find Jianshan as easily as the Azure Pung King. Even if we know where Jianshan is, we definitely won't be faster than the Azure Pung King in terms of speed. Let's think about how to fend off the Azure Pung King's revenge. The Azure Pung King is a vengeful person. It definitely won't let this matter go. Let's immediately send people to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Although we can't personally hand over the Inata Tower to the heavenly palace of Bishing and exchange it for great merit, it'll still be a great merit if we could be the first to bring news of the Inata Tower over. In the vast void of the universe, in a starry sky extremely far away from the heavenly underworld star, the originally calm space suddenly rippled like water. In the next moment, the space suddenly distorted violently, and two figures suddenly appeared out of thin air, as if they had traveled through space and suddenly appeared out of thin air. The two of them were Jinshan and Kea, who had fled here through the cosmic movement talisman. Spurt. As soon as they appeared, Jinshan could not help but vomit blood again. His face was rather pale. Jinshan, are you okay? Are your injuries serious? Kea asked with concern. He immediately wanted to support Jinshan. However, when she moved her body, she found that her waist was tightly hugged by one of Jinshan's arms. A strong force came from his arms, making her unable to move at all. Feeling the power and warmth coming from Jinshan's arm, Kea found it hard to remain calm. His heart began to beat uncontrollably, and ripples began to form in the depths of his heart. Sensing Kea's movement, Jinshan immediately loosened his arm around Kea's waist. In his panic earlier, he did not have the time to get Kea into the Inata Tower. As a result, he could only hug Kea tightly and flee through the cosmic movement talisman. He did not have any other intentions. The light in Kea's eyes flickered. She looked at Jinshan with some mixed feelings and said in concern, "This is a god-tier healing medicine. Eat it quickly and stabilize your wounds." With that, Kea took out a heavenly resource she had obtained from the divine medicinal garden in Poseidon's palace and passed it to Jinshan. At the same time, Kea opened her hand. Immediately, an invisible suction appeared in her hand, gathering all the chaotic blood Jinshan had spat out in the surroundings. In the end, it condensed into a thumb-sized droplet of blood in her hand. I know that every time you break through to a new realm, you consume a huge amount of cultivation resources. This blood also contains a portion of your power. Every time you lose a drop of blood, it means that your power is reduced by a portion. Thus, this blood cannot be wasted. As she said that, Kea slowly raised her hand and controlled the droplet of blood to approach Jinshan's lips. Jinshan looked at the droplet of chaotic blood and nodded slightly. With a gentle suction, he swallowed all the chaotic blood and said, "My wounds are fine. I'll make a full recovery before long." Jinshan paused when she reached there. She looked back at the vast space behind her and became extremely stern. She said with a deep voice, "I once heard that the Azure Pung King's speed is unmatched in the world. Although we've escaped through the cosmic movement talisman, I have a strong feeling that we're not safe right now. With the Azure Pung King's speed, he'll catch up very soon." Kea dismissed her thoughts with that. She became stern and frowned. "With our speed, it'll be impossible for us to escape from the Azure Pung King if we travel through outer space. The Azure Pung King should have many ways to find us. It looks like we can only escape from the Azure Pung King if we enter a spatial crack." That's right. The 5 elements are reversed in a spatial crack, and space is in a mess. Even the laws of the world will be affected. Even if the Azure Pung King is a Grand Prime, he'll still be affected to a certain extent in a spatial crack. However, we have the Inata Tower, so we don't have to fear the spatial storms in there at all. We can rampage through there fearlessly. Perhaps that really is a place where we can shake off Grand Primes right now. Jinshan's eyes lit up. Immediately, he took out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways and said to Kea, "Let's not tarry. Let's go right now. But I'm afraid I can't rip open the space here by myself. Kea, lend me a hand. Let's use our full strength and rip open the space here." "All right." Kea nodded. Afterwards, she stood beside Jinshan and used her full strength without holding back at all. She used the laws of creation, destruction, and fire together. She fused the 3 laws of different elements perfectly, condensing them into a single inscription that shot towards the space before her. At the same time, Jinshan's 9-star sword of heavenly ways shone with dazzling starlight. Huge, illusionary stars appeared one after another, striking the space before them with power that was no weaker than a primordial realm expert. Jinshan and Kea used their most powerful attacks at the same time. Immediately, the space there shook as a meter-long spatial crack suddenly appeared. "Let's go into the tower," Jinshan called out. He and Kea entered the Inata Tower in a flash. They controlled the Inata Tower to shrink to the size of a fist and directly entered the spatial crack. Soon after the Inata Tower entered, the spatial crack closed by itself, returning the region to its original state. Peace returned to the region of outer space. However, the peace did not last for too long before it was broken once again. A dazzling, azure light flickered in the depths of outer space, heading straight towards where Jianshan had vanished. The azure light moved just too quickly, unbelievably quickly. In the previous moment, it was still in the depths of outer space, but in the next moment, it seemed to have crossed through space, crossing an extremely great distance, and arriving where Jianshan had been. The azure figure was the Azure Pung King, who had pursued them with lightning speed. Jianshan has actually vanished here? The Azure Pung King hovered in outer space proudly. He stared at the drop of chaotic blood in his hand for a while before the tremendous senses of his soul immediately flooded out, enveloping the entire region of outer space. However, he frowned very soon. He discovered nothing with the senses of his soul. He failed to find any traces of Jianshan. Moreover, after arriving here, he failed to find any traces of Jianshan, even when he used a secret technique with the droplet of chaotic blood in his hand. It was as if Jianshan had completely vanished from the world. You're dreaming if you think you can escape from me. The Azure Pung King snorted coldly. His eyes were extremely cold. Afterwards, he closed his eyes and fused with the world. He used his comprehension of laws to peer into the past and future. So you've hidden in a spatial crack. Do you really think you can escape from me just like that? You're far too naive. I have to obtain the Inata Tower before the solitary sword ancestor arrives. Very soon, the Azure Pung King opened his eyes and sneered. He casually ripped open space and entered the spatial crack with a flash. P.S. Shi's character portraits have also been released. Right now, several character portraits have already appeared on Xiao Yao's official account. The later ones are still being updated. Brothers, please follow Xiao Yao's official account on WeChat, XingXingCiao110, or just search for Xinxing Xiao Yao's pen name. Then check the history and you'll be able to see these character portraits. Chapter 2269. Within the spatial crack, violent streams of energy and space-time storms filled the entire space. There were even terrifying temporal vortexes mixed in. There was danger everywhere as far as the eye could see. The slightest carelessness could lead to certain doom. Even primordial realm experts needed to be extremely careful here. Otherwise, even someone as powerful as a primordial realm expert would die here. In this dangerous spatial crack, there was a broken tower that was only the size of a fist. It was covered in sword slashes, but it had turned into a faint golden ray of light. It rampaged through everything in an unbridled manner, shattering many powerful streams of energy and spatial storms that constantly distorted space. It advanced in an extremely domineering manner. It was as if the spatial crack that made many primordial realm experts pale and unwilling to enter easily posed no threat to the damaged tower at all. Only the time vortexes that could distort time could make the small pagoda avoid them. The tiny tower was naturally the Inata Tower. At this moment, Jianshan and Kea both sat with their eyes closed in the Inata Tower. Jianshan's entire mind had fused with the Inata Tower. He used all his strength to control the Inata Tower to move through the spatial crack quickly. He knew that the Azure Pung King would catch up very soon, so he did not dare to be careless at all. Even when he successfully hid in the spatial crack, he still did not feel at ease. The Azure Pung King's strength could be drastically weakened due to the chaotic laws and incomplete laws here. As a result, he did not bother with healing at all. He used all his strength to control the Inata Tower. Kea sat beside Jianshan with her eyes closed. She also used her own method to sense the situation outside the Inata Tower. The Inata Tower was a peak god artifact. It possessed its own space, an independent miniature world. Logically speaking, it was impossible for anyone to sense the situation outside from within the Inata Tower apart from Jianshan, who had refined a portion of the tower. However, Kea was an exception. Although she had not refined the Inata Tower like Jianshun, or even controlled it, she could clearly sense everything that was happening outside from within the Inata Tower. Strange. Why do I feel like I can control the tower, like Jianshun? It's really a wonderful feeling. Kea was extremely puzzled as well. She was perplexed as to why she would have such a feeling. At that moment, she even had an urge to try controlling the Inata Tower. However, when she thought about how Jianshan was controlling the Inata Tower to fly away, she could only suppress this urge in the end. I seem to have a connection with the tower that even I can't explain clearly. I didn't have this feeling in the beginning, but as my strength rapidly increased, this feeling slowly appeared and became more and more intense. Kea frowned as she thought hard. However, no matter how hard she tried, she was still unable to come up with anything. At this moment, Kea's heart suddenly tightened. At that moment, she felt like her soul seemed to sublimate, and her connection with the Inata Tower became even tighter. A sliver of her consciousness seemed to fly out of the Inata Tower, allowing her to clearly see an azure streak of light shooting towards them with unbelievable speed from an extremely distant spatial crack behind the Inata Tower. It's the Azure Pung King. He's actually so fast. Kea's heart tightened. She opened her eyes and looked at Jinshin. She understood that Jinshin had not discovered the Azure Pung King's pursuit. However, the Azure Pung King was just too fast. He had turned into an Azure Pung that was only 2 meters long. With a flap of his wings, he could cross extremely great distances. Space seemed to fold before him. When Kea discovered him, he was still billions of kilometers away from the Inata Tower, but in just a few seconds, he had arrived 1,000,000 kilometers behind the Inata Tower. He was rapidly approaching it. "Oh no, the Azure Pung King has caught up," Kea immediately warned. Jianshun opened his eyes when he heard that. He glanced at Kea in doubt. He constantly sensed the outside world. Everything within several 100,000 kilometers of the Inata Tower was unable to escape his senses, but he did not discover any traces of the Azure Pung King. Even though he was very curious as to how Kea had determined that the Azure Pung King had caught up, he trusted Kea very much. Without any hesitation, he immediately changed the direction of the Inata Tower, approaching an even more dangerous region. Just as the Inata Tower adjusted its position, a huge hand, completely condensed from energy, suddenly appeared. It grabbed the space where the Inata Tower had just been with a terrifying presence. This time, due to the close distance, Jianshin clearly saw the huge hand that had suddenly appeared. His face changed. If he had not changed the direction of the Inata Tower in time, the Inata Tower probably would have been caught by the hand already. Jianshin understood that although it was impossible for the Azure Pung King to destroy the Inata Tower, the Azure Pung King was a grand prime who stood at the apex of the pyramid after all. He possessed extraordinary abilities. Once the Inata Tower ended up in the Azure Pung King's hands, the outcome would be horrible. Afterwards, Jianshin controlled the Inata Tower to advance in a zigzag manner. He would go wherever there was danger. He was fearless with the Inata Tower's toughness. No one who has been targeted by this king has ever managed to escape. Even if you've chosen a special place like this, which limits this king's abilities to a certain extent, you still can't escape from this king. Behind, the Azure Pung King sneered. Even though the spatial crack could threaten primordial realm experts, he was an existence who stood at the apex of the pyramid. He possessed extraordinary abilities and was extremely powerful. There was nothing that could threaten him in the spatial crack. It would only obstruct him slightly at most. The Azure Pung King flapped his wings, and azure light immediately poured down. It whistled out as an extremely violent gale. The gale possessed unimaginable power. All the streams of energy and spatial storms that stood in the Azure Pung King's way collapsed before the gale. They were as fragile as tofu. The entire space shook violently. The remaining power of the gale caught up to the Inata Tower under Jinshin's control, causing it to shake and sway. It constantly churned in the air, making it difficult for Jinshin to control. The Inata Tower immediately slowed down slightly. The Azure Pung King used this opportunity to pursue. In a single instance, he crossed 1,000,000 kilometers and arrived within 1,000 kilometers of the Inata Tower. Jinshin's face sank within the Inata Tower. He set his sights on a temporal vortex nearby and immediately made up his mind. He directly charged over with the Inata Tower. Jinshin had always feared the temporal vortices there. Even with the protection of the Inata Tower, he did not dare to set foot in them so easily. This was because he had already witnessed the power of these temporal vortices. He knew that the flow of time in there was extremely unstable. He was afraid that he would be affected by the flow of time if he fell in, causing him to pass through countless years in a single instance. By the time he emerged again, the outside world would have already changed. Or perhaps time would flow backwards and he would become a newborn, returning to the most fundamental state of life. Or perhaps he would return to nothingness. But now, under the Azure Pung King's relentless pursuit, he had no other choice. Swish! The Inata Tower directly entered a temporal vortex with a faint, golden light. P.S. Shenghuamu'er's portrait has been released as well. The other portraits are being released as well. To those who want to see them, please follow Xiaoyao's official WeChat account, Xingxingxiao110. It was the full pinyin of Xinxing Xiaoyao's pseudonym. There was also a phone number for the police. You could also find it by directly searching for Xinxing Xiaoyao. Moreover, Xiaoyao discovered that many people did not know how to find the portraits that had been released before, so Xiaoyao would like to teach them. After following the account, there would be a menu at the bottom of the screen. You would be able to see the historical information there. To those who cannot see the menu, please click on the coordinates of the text input box, which is to the left of the voice button, and switch between the input box and the menu. Chapter 2270. The Azure Pung King immediately sneered when he saw Jinshan charge into the temporal vortex recklessly. The temporal vortex could pose a fatal threat to other primordial realm experts, but he no longer feared the temporal vortex with his current level of cultivation. The Azure Pung King followed closely behind, charging into the temporal vortex as well. But very soon, the Azure Pung King became stunned. He discovered that as soon as he charged into the temporal vortex, the Inata Tower that he had locked onto had suddenly vanished from his sight. God damn it! The Azure Pung King could not help but curse. How could he not understand that he had already been affected by the temporal vortex? On the surface, he had entered the temporal vortex at basically the same time as the Inata Tower, but the time he experienced inside was completely different from the time the Inata Tower experienced. Perhaps he had already spent a very long time in the temporal vortex in that split second, which was why the Inata Tower that he had locked onto had vanished from his sight. The Azure Pung King flapped his wings and charged out with great speed. At the same time, the extremely powerful power of laws wrapped around him, resisting the changes in time from all directions. At this moment, if someone stood outside the temporal vortex, they would discover that the Azure Pung King seemed to be moving in slow motion. He flapped his wings extremely slowly, advancing at a speed no faster than a snail. Just when the Azure Pung King was about to charge out of the temporal vortex, the streams of energy nearby suddenly became extraordinarily violent. Temporal vortexes in the surroundings seemed to be attracted by something, gathering around the Azure Pung King from all directions. Several dozen temporal vortexes formed an extremely huge storm of space-time, enveloping the Azure Pung King in a grand fashion. It seemed like the several dozen temporal vortexes had been gathered together by a mysterious hand, specially targeting the Azure Pung King. No matter where the Azure Pung King charged out from, he could not avoid being sucked into a second, third, and fourth temporal vortex. Even though the temporal vortices were unable to pose any threat or harm to the Azure Pung King, they had kept him busy, temporarily trapping him here. Although the Prosper Plane was one of the 49 great planes of the Saints' world, the Prosper Plane was so powerful that it surpassed all the other planes. It was one of the few peak planes out of the 49 great planes and 81 great planets. This was because the heavenly palace of Bishing was located on the Prosper Plane. Not only was the heavenly palace of Bishing the name of an organization, but it was also one of the three great treasures of the Inata Grand Prime. The Inata Grand Prime was one of the 7 grand exalts of the saint's world in the past. His cultivation had reached the peak of Grand Prime, making him an existence akin to the laws of the world. He spent most of his time cultivating on the Prosper Plane, interfering with the operation of the laws of the world and affecting the order of the world. As a result, the laws of the world on the Prosper Plane became denser and clearer, allowing people to comprehend the laws of the world to achieve twice the results with half the effort. As time went on, the Prosper Plane became one of the few peak planes in the saint's world. For example, everlasting empires and peak clans were not rare on the Prosper Plane. As for the heavenly palace of Bishing, it had become a sacred place in the eyes of all the experts on the Prosper Plane without a doubt. It was extremely supreme. At this moment, a hazy figure shrouded in a hazy light stood before a lake in the majestic heavenly palace of Bishing at the center of the Prosper Plane. The laws around him condensed as if he had truly fused with the world and the laws, becoming a supreme ruler. Every single word and action of his represented the supreme will of the world. What was reflected in the lake in front of this person was not a clear lake. Instead, it was a chaotic space filled with colorful energy turbulence and spatial storms. To no surprise, the chaotic space was the scene within the spatial crack. Inside the spatial crack, the most eye-catching thing was the gathering of dozens of time vortexes, trapping a green rock that had shrunk to a size of 2 meters. Master, I just saw the planet Lord of Tianming bring a few important people of planet Tianming to visit you. He said that he wanted to see the First Majesty, but the First Majesty has gone out to search for Senior Gu Dao's soul fragment under Master's orders. She is not here, so I can only directly report this to Master. An old voice rang out from outside. It was the voice of the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Although the artifact spirit could control everything within the heavenly palace of Bishing, where it could learn about everything that happened with a single thought, the region where the person shrouded in hazy light was clearly not something the artifact spirit could sense. It had no idea what was happening inside either. After a moment of pause, the artifact spirit continued politely. The news they bring is quite important. They seem to know the whereabouts of Master's treasure. Send them back. The hazy figure that seemed to have become away spoke before the lake. His voice was cold and emotionless, containing all the sounds in the world. It was impossible to tell if he was a man or a woman. Yes, Master, the artifact spirit backed off politely. My fourth way has already taken shape. It will truly take form before long, the hazy figure murmured softly. After the artifact spirit left, the figure shrouded in dense light murmured softly. Then, he gently waved his hand. Immediately, the world reflected by the lake in front of him changed. The scene in the spatial crack disappeared. As the light and shadow flickered, it seemed as if countless worlds were flashing. Even the world where the Tian Yuan continent resided vanished in a flash. I've already searched through the entire Saints world in the past few years. I've searched through thousands of lower worlds, but I've failed to find any traces of you. Where has the flame Reverend been hiding? As the only everlasting empire on the cloud plane, the Tian Empire did indeed possess unshakable strength. It was extraordinarily terrifying. Aside from the Heavens Link Peak, none of the peak clans and organizations on the cloud plane could shake the Tian Empire's position. At this moment, 3 towering towers stood silently in the depths of the imperial palace like pillars that held up the sky. The 3 towers were the pride of the Tian Empire. At the same time, they were Poseidon pillars that held the Tian Empire in place. They were the ultimate power that could deter the entire world. However, at this moment, black clouds suddenly surged from one of the towers as laws gathered. An extremely terrifying presence suddenly expanded, enveloping the entire central region in a single instance. It expanded to the north, south, east, and west regions, causing the sky of the entire cloud plane to pulse in an extremely unstable manner. The heavenless demon Exalt has actually broken through. At the same time, 2 old men appeared silently at the top of the other 2 towers. The two of them stared at the tower, shrouded in demonic aura in surprise and joy. Chapter 2271. One of the two old men was the ancestral emperor of the Tian Empire who had abdicated a long time ago. The other person was the first imperial protector of the Tian Empire when it was first established, Chenfeng. The two of them were the most ancient existences in the Tian Empire. They had become grand primes many years ago. They were peak experts who stood at the apex of the plane. At this moment, the demonic aura around the tower where the heavenless demon Exalt resided was withdrawn, revealing a black figure hidden within the demonic clouds. It was a middle-aged man in black robes. His face was cold, and he seemed slightly evil. He hovered in the air as if he was the supreme being of the world. A domineering aura emanated from his body. The presence was so powerful that it caused the surroundings to change color and space to distort. It was as if he had become the ruler of the world. His cold gaze was filled with coldness that looked down on all living things. This person was the heavenless demon Exalt, as well as the second grand imperial protector of the Tian Empire when it was first established. When the heavenless demon Exalt had just broken through, an old man with white hair and ruddy complexion sat on the ground on a mountain peak that was enveloped by a powerful formation somewhere in the central region of the cloud plain. He focused on explaining the mysteries of the universe to the old man in blood-red robes who sat across from him. His every word and action seemed to represent the truths of the world, resonating with the laws of the world. Vaguely, the sound of the laws seemed to resonate with the laws of the world. Vaguely, the sound of the laws seemed to resonate and revolve around him. Suddenly, a gleam of light flashed through the old man's eyes. At that moment, his gaze became as deep as the universe. He stared into the distance, and he suddenly became stern. This is bad. I never thought that the heavenless demon Exalt of the Tian Empire would actually break through. The cloud plain will no longer be peaceful. The white-haired, ruddy-faced, sage-like old man stood up and stared into the distance as he spoke with a solemn expression. Peak Lord, what has happened? The old man in blood-red robes also stood up and asked rather cautiously. A great upheaval is about to occur on the cloud plain. Perhaps a peak organization will vanish in the annals of history. However, this matter has nothing to do with you. Houston, all you need to do is cultivate here peacefully and wait for that person's arrival, said the old man, who had an immortal aura and was addressed as the Peak Master. He was the Peak Lord of the Heavens Link Peak. He possessed an extremely great status on the cloud plain. Houston became stern when he heard that. After a moment of silence, he said, "Will the Tianyuan family be in trouble this time?" Originally, the Tianyuan family could have stayed out of this. After all, with their strength, they did not have a right to get involved. It's just a pity that the Tianyuan family is connected to the Shi clan of the northern region. The Peak Lord of the Heavens Link Peak sighed gently. Peak Lord, I want to return to the Tianyuan clan immediately, Houston said decisively. Once you leave here, you'll be in great danger. Houston, before that person arrives, you can cultivate here peacefully. I won't let you take a single step away from the Heavens Link Peak. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak said firmly. There was no room for negotiation. At the same time, the peak existences hidden in various places on the ancient cloud plain all roused from their seclusion. They either looked at the Tian Empire in the central region sternly or excitedly with eagerness. The heavenless demon Exalt has actually broken through. The Tian clan is filled with ambition. They've never given up on their grand plan of uniting the cloud plain. It's only because of the Peak Lord's existence that the Tian clan hasn't dared to act recklessly. Now that the heavenless demon Exalt has broken through, the Tian clan truly possesses the power to suppress the Peak Lord. There's probably no one who can stop the Tian clan on the cloud plain now. Extremely powerful senses of the soul crossed over from various places on the cloud plain as they discussed with one another. At the same time, in an unknown space extremely far away from the cloud plain, a majestic divine hall stood there silently, like a primordial beast. It radiated with a terrifying presence that could shake up the world. The divine hall seemed to be able to suppress an entire region of space. When it stood there, it seemed like even the independent and unknown space had to submit to it, prostrating itself before the divine hall. At this moment, a rather deep voice suddenly rang out in a gloomy room at the very top of the divine hall. Something huge is about to happen on the cloud plane. I've actually been dragged into this matter. It looks like I can't let her remain there any longer. The voice in the room fell silent for a while before suddenly calling out, "Changming, come see me immediately." The voice was not loud, but it rang out everywhere in the hall. Just as his voice sounded, an old man in black robes silently appeared outside the secret room. He respectfully bowed towards the tightly shut secret room and said, "This old servant greets master. Quickly go to the cloud plane and bring her back safely from the southern region. This is her portrait and aura. With your level of cultivation, as soon as you set foot on the cloud plane, you will be able to sense her location immediately." As he said that, a stream of consciousness flowed out of the room and directly entered the old man's forehead. It turned into the appearance of a girl. "If she doesn't leave with you, take out this strand of hair." Afterwards, a strand of black hair appeared outside the room, hovering before Changming. Changming's eyes suddenly narrowed when he saw the strand of hair. He could tell with a single glance that it was his master's hair. His master's presence was clearly lingering on it. Changming did not dare to tarry. He carefully accepted the strand of hair with both hands and stored it away before leaving immediately. "Where is the war demon?" Changming arrived in the divine hall and called out to the empty divine hall. "Grand Elder." A deep voice reverberated through the empty hall. With that, a terrifying pressure suddenly permeated the entire hall. It seemed to be able to crush the sky. It filled the entire hall with a destructive force. "Come with me to the cloud plane. I have a bad feeling about this trip to the cloud plane, so you have to be careful," Changming said with a heavy voice. If the Grand Elder has a bad feeling about this trip to the cloud plane, it means that this trip to the cloud plane might not be peaceful. It's been a long time since I've fought. I really look forward to what fun I'll run into this time. I hope it won't disappoint me too much. P.S. A portrait of Jinshin has been posted on the public account today. The other portraits are being posted as well. If you want to see them, please follow Xiaoyao's WeChat account, Xingxingxiao110. It's Xinxing Xiaoyao's full pinyin name. There's also a phone number for the police. You can also find it by searching Xinxing Xiaoyao. Moreover, Xiaoyao has discovered that many people don't know how to find the portraits that have been posted before. Xiaoyao will explain it here. After following the account, there's a menu at the bottom of the screen. You can see the history there. For those who can't see the menu, please click on the coordinates of the text input box, which is to the left of the voice button, and switch between the input box and the menu. Chapter 2272. In the depths of the imperial palace of the northern region of the Cloud Plain, 3 ancient stone towers stood silently in a forbidden ground that forbade anyone from entering. The 3 stone towers represented the peak power of the Shi dynasty. In the Shi dynasty, apart from the current Emperor Shi, the 3 other chaotic primes spent most of their time in seclusion in the stone towers. They did not pay any attention to the matters of the world. Only extremely severe matters that could threaten the safety of the Shi dynasty would alarm the 3 of them. However, at this moment, the 3 chaotic primes who originally resided in the 3 stone towers had all gathered together. Even the dignified Shi emperor sat in the air sternly. With the breakthrough of the heavenless demon exalt of the Tian Empire, a storm of blood is about to descend on the Cloud Plain. Those who will be affected will be the peak organizations that stand at the apex of the plane. However, our Shi Empire is one of the 4 eternal empires on the Cloud Plain. We control over 80% of the comprehension in the northern region, so it's impossible for our Shi Empire to remain unaffected. We'll definitely be dragged in. There are only 2 paths before us right now. We don't know about this matter. The first is to yield to the Tian Empire and become their vassal. From today onwards, we'll follow the orders of the Tian Empire. The second option was to join the resistance and resist the Tian Empire's path to supremacy. May I ask what the 3 of you think about this? The oldest ancestor, Shi Lianxue, said emotionlessly as he glanced at the other three. Shi Haoshuan, Shi Haoming, and the current Emperor Shi Ziyun all fell silent. Although there have been instances of the 49 Great Plains being united in the history of the Saints' world, it's rare. As a result, in my opinion, it will definitely not be easy for the Tian Empire to unify the Cloud Plain this time. With the Heavens Link Peak leading the way, they'll definitely stop the Tian Empire with everything they have. Even if the Heavenless Demon Exalt cultivation has broken through and the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak is no longer his opponent, it's still possible. After a moment of silence, Emperor Shi's father, Shi Haoshuan, broke the silence and analyzed seriously. That's right. After all, before the Heavenless Demon Exalt broke through, the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak was known as the strongest on the Cloud Plain. His battle prowess was extraordinary, and he rarely had an opponent at the same level. Even if he's no longer the Heavenless Demon Exalt's opponent, he can still put up a fight at the very least, Shi Haoming said. He was extremely confident in the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak. It doesn't matter whether the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak is the Heavenless Demon Exalt's opponent or not. If our Shi Empire submits to the Tian Empire, we'll definitely be stopped by the Luotian clan. After all, the Luotian clan receives a large amount of tributes from our Shi dynasty every year. Once we submit to the Tian Empire, they'll lose the opportunity to receive tributes from us forever. As a result, they definitely won't watch us submit to the Tian Empire, Shi Haoming said. His voice was firm as he continued. Compared to submitting to the Tian Empire and being completely obedient to the Tian Empire, I would rather maintain this relationship with the God's Fallen clan. What if I suggest we join the Tian Empire? Shi Lianxue raised an eyebrow and looked at the three of them. Ancestral Emperor, we have to be careful about this. Emperor Shi Haoming, and Shi Haoshuan all objected. None of them were willing to submit to the Tian Empire. The ancestral emperor of the Shi Empire, Shi Lianxue, nodded. Since the three of you are not optimistic about the unification of the Tian Empire, then, as soon as he said that, a sliver of black, demonic aura suddenly flashed through Shi Lianxue's eyes. His face immediately became cold, and with a thought, a powerful pulse of energy immediately radiated out. Countless strands of energy appeared out of nowhere, enveloping Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming. In the hearts of Shi Ziyun, Shi Haoshuan, and Shi Haoming, not only was Shi Lianxue the ancestral emperor of the Shi dynasty, but he was also the senior they respected the most. The three of them had never thought that Shi Lianxue, who was related to them by blood, would suddenly move against them. As a result, the three of them were firmly trapped by the strands of energy as they were caught off guard. Moreover, the strands of energy had penetrated deep into their flesh. Not only did it restrict their movements, but it also sealed up their cultivation and the senses of their souls. Ancestral Emperor, why? Shi Haoshuan and Shi Haoming stared at Shi Lianxue in disbelief. At that moment, they only felt their hearts thump with pain. Emperor Shi Ziyun, had a sunken face. He glared at the emotionless Shi Lianxue and said coldly, Ancestral Emperor, why are you doing this? I can't get you to join the Tian Empire, so I can only do this. Our Shi dynasty will stand on the side of the Tian Empire when they unify the Cloud Plain this time. We will assist them with everything we have, said Shi Lianxue. Similar matters did not just happen to the Shi Empire in the northern region. The Blood Sun Empire in the southern region, the Zaheo Empire in the eastern region, and the Jinjian Empire in the western region all faced the same fate as the Shi dynasty at different times. All the peak experts of the empires who did not support the Tian Empire were imprisoned through various methods by the most respected people. Within a short period of time, the four great immortal empires that were well known in the Cloud Plain had quietly changed owners one after another. The black-robed Heavenless Demon Exalt and the two other Grand Primes of the Tian Empire gathered in a majestic hall within the imperial palace of the central region of the Cloud Plain. They were all silent. The Heavenless Demon Exalt sat in the air with his eyes closed. The two Grand Primes of the Tian Empire stared at him without blinking at all. At this moment, the Heavenless Demon Exalt suddenly snapped open his eyes, He said indifferently, "The 4 eternal empires of the cloud plane are under my control now. We can begin the plan." Fantastic. With the submission of the 4 empires, we'll have absolute control over the 4 regions. We just need to focus on dealing with the peak clans now. The 2 Grand Primes beamed with joy. A vicious light suddenly flashed through the heavenless demon Exalt's eyes. He said coldly, "Before dealing with them, I want to eliminate the dissidents first. I'll start with the heavenly demon religion on the cloud plane." "What? You want to move against the heavenly demon religion? Are you confident about dealing with the great elder of the heavenly demon religion? Provoking the heavenly demon religion at a time like this probably isn't a wise decision." The 2 Grand Primes of the Tian Empire became fearful when the heavenly demon religion was mentioned. "It's fine. Although the great elder of the heavenly demon religion has a glorious battle record in the past, the strongest of his opponents are only at the 2nd heavenly layer. As a result, I'm certain that the great elder of the heavenly demon religion is only a 3rd heavenly layer Grand Prime at most. There's nothing to fear. Moreover, the reason why I'm starting with the heavenly demon religion is because the soul beads and blood beads refined from the blood and energy of souls in the branches of the heavenly demon religion are exactly what I lack for the treasure," the heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. As he said that, he reached out. Immediately, several dozen cultivators below the primordial realm across the cloud plane died. The space rings on their fingers all exploded, and a small, black flag flew out. After absorbing all the souls of the cultivators, it shot off with lightning speed. At the same time, streaks of black light shot over from afar before the heavenless demon Exalt. They turned into small, black flags that hovered there silently. There were a total of 80 of them. Chapter 2273. I'd like to see who's bold enough to steal my 9 soul condensing flag. The Heaven Void Demon Lord snorted coldly. Soon after, the heavenless demon Exalt coldly snorted. With a thought, the tremendous senses of his soul erupted like a flood, enveloping the entire cloud plane. But very soon his face became cold. His senses enveloped the entire cloud plane. Apart from a few peak clans on the cloud plane, where the senses of his soul were unable to penetrate due to the protective formations, he searched every inch of the cloud plane, including the depths of the ground. However, he failed to find the missing flag. It seems that the missing 9 soul-gathering flag was either hidden by a top family or taken away from the Cloud Prefecture. However, these 81 soul-gathering flags were refined by me using my demonic blood. Every flag is connected to my mind. Let me see which top clan on the Cloud Plane dares to steal my things. Even if the flag has been taken away from the Cloud Plane, I can still find its exact location. The Heaven Void Demon Lord said coldly. The Heavenless Demon Exalt said coldly. Afterwards, he immediately sat down in the air as demonic aura surged around him. A terrifying pulse of energy radiated from him. He had already used a secret technique to search for the last 9 soul-gathering flag. The 2 Grand Primes of the Tian Empire sat before the Heaven Void Demon Lord silently. At this moment, they became stern as well. The Heaven Void Demon Lord was directly related to whether their Tian Empire could unite the Cloud Plane or not. They did not wish to see anything unexpected happen at a time like this. A while later, the surging demonic aura around the Heaven Void Demon Lord gradually calmed down. He opened his eyes, and they were filled with ruthlessness. His face was sunken. "Heavenless, have you found the last 9 soul-gathering flag?" A Grand Prime asked rather nervously before the Heavenless Demon Exalt. "I actually can't sense the existence of the last flag at all. However, even without the 9 soul condensing flag, it won't affect our grand plan of unifying the Cloud Plane." In the southern region of the Cloud Plane, the divine kingdom of Pingtian that was unknown in the past had basically become a household name across the entire southern region. It was a great existence that few people did not know about. This was not only because the divine kingdom of Pingtian had evolved from a weak divine kingdom to an ancient empire that possessed a primordial realm expert. Most importantly, the divine kingdom of Pingtian possessed the Tianyuan family. The Tianyuan family's strength was indeed nothing in the southern region. As a matter of fact, some people would not even look at them properly. However, there was no organization that dared to underestimate the Tianyuan family in the vast southern region, much less offend them. This was because the greatest elder of the Tianyuan family was the only daughter of the current emperor of the Shi dynasty. She was currently an emperor who enjoyed the limelight among the four eternal empires. In order to avenge his daughter, he had gone as far as to slaughter all the members of the imperial clan of the Shi dynasty. Even the esteemed grand imperial protector of the Shi dynasty was not spared. His viciousness and heartlessness had already been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, causing countless people to shiver in fear. At the same time, his love for his daughter earned the admiration of many people in the world. As a result, there was naturally no one who dared to offend Shiyu in the northern and southern regions with such a powerful and vicious father. The Tianyuan family that she watched over became glorious because of this. They enjoyed a status that did not match their strength at all in the southern region. The Tianyuan family remained where they had been in the Dong and province of the divine kingdom of Pingtian. However, compared to when Jianxin had left in the past, the Tianyuan family had changed drastically. Not only had their territory expanded by several times, but they had become even more majestic as well. From afar, one could see a series of bejeweled buildings. They were arranged in an orderly manner, grand and majestic. They gave off a sense of majesty and holiness. At this moment, a few people walked side by side in the palace-like Tianyuan family's garden. They strolled leisurely. I really never thought that so many things would have happened when I left the Tianyuan continent. Even the world where the Tianyuan family resides was almost destroyed. Fortunately, everyone managed to make it through, sighed a young man in his 20s. Among them, a young man in his 20s who was dressed in a white robe and had an extraordinary bearing sighed. The only pity is that I've only seen you, the little tiger, and these two kids after rushing all the way from the Prosper Plain. Seniors Ruijin, Honglian, Blackfish, and the snake aren't here. The young man shook his head in pity. There was an undisguised sense of reminiscence in his voice as well. To no surprise, the young man was Ming Dong. You're the kid. You're the kid. Don't think that you can bully me just because you're tall. Let me tell you, I'm a little ancestor who has lived for 1,000,000 years. Back then, I didn't even know that you had only been born on the Tianyuan continent after slumbering for several dozen millennia in Mercenary City. Even your ancestors aren't as old as me. An innocent girl who only seemed to be 11 or 12 years old stood beside Ming Dong. She stood with her hands on her hips as she glared at Ming Dong angrily. The girl was naturally Xiaoling. To no surprise, Xiao Jin and Siyu were among them as well. Xiao Jin was still dressed in golden robes, as if he had been forged from gold. He had grown up long ago and seemed even more mature. He was no longer the child he had been when he first appeared in Flame City. Siyu seemed like a handsome young man now. He stood straight as he slowly walked with his hands behind his back. He was stern, and his face was cold. He seemed rather like an expert. Out of the entire Tianyuan family, Ming Dong only knew the three of them. Newbies, Ruijin, Honglian, Blackfish, and so on had ventured out many years ago. Ming Dong did not know any of the people from the world of Forsaken Saints, such as Xiong Zhong and Cheng Jingyan. Oh, is this little girl really that old? I really can't tell. Beside Ming Dong was a devastatingly beautiful woman in snow-white clothes. She stared at Xiao Ling, who would never grow up, with her large, beautiful eyes as she covered her mouth and giggled. This woman was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire who had met Ming Dong in Poseidon Palace and had her second body slain by Ming Dong, Yin Xiaoyan. Ming Dong was not tempted at all when he looked at the beautiful Yun Xiaoyan beside him. Instead, his heart was filled with bitterness and helplessness, as well as an indescribable feeling. He could not help but think about what his 8th senior sister had said to him when he had first emerged from Poseidon Palace. Junior brother, I control the way of fate, so I can see through the fate of many people. I can even vaguely see the karma of a person's past life. In your past life with Yun Xiaoyan, Yun Xiaoyan was deeply in love with you and did many things for you. However, you always let her down, deeply hurting her heart. In the end, Yun Xiaoyan died because of you. Her life ended because of you. Perhaps the threads of fate have arranged for the two of you to meet again in this life. As a result, you can't let her down in this life. The Eighth Majesty did not say much about his past life with Yun Xiaoyan, because even she could only see the surface. She was unable to completely understand everything. However, just those words alone were enough to make Ming Dong unable to make up his mind about Yun Xiaoyan, no matter what. Ninth Highness, there are hidden currents all around Cloud State. A storm is coming. I'm afraid something big is about to happen. Something big is about to happen. At this moment, a golden light suddenly flashed through the eyes of scholarly, middle-aged man who followed Ming Dong closely. Chapter 2274. The Azure Peng King hasn't pursued us. We seem to have shaken him off. Jianshun controlled the Inata Tower to fly as quickly as he could through the dangerous spatial crack. He paid attention to the changes in the outside world at all times. He seems to have been trapped in a temporal vortex. The temporal vortex really is wondrous. The flow of time inside is ever-changing. The Azure Peng King charged into the temporal vortex just as quickly as we did. However, we were unaffected, while the Azure Peng King was trapped, said Jianshun. He glanced at the Inata Tower. He had no idea whether he was unaffected by the temporal vortex because of luck or because the Inata Tower was just too high of a level. Or perhaps it was because of him. This was because when the Inata Tower charged into the temporal vortex, Jianshun experienced a very wondrous feeling even though he was hiding in the Inata Tower. In that moment, he felt like his soul seemed to form an extremely obscure connection with the chaotic laws of time that filled the temporal vortex. He seemed to be able to sense the existence of the laws of time. However, since the Inata Tower only remained in the temporal vortex for a split second before charging out, coupled with the fact that the laws of time in the vortex were extremely chaotic, he failed to obtain any substantial benefits in the end. It's probably due to luck. After all, I don't control the laws of time, so it's impossible for me to affect the temporal vortex, thought Jianshun. That was close. Fortunately, we charged into the temporal vortex in time. Fortunately, the power of the laws in the temporal vortex didn't affect us, or we probably wouldn't even need to wait for the Azure Peng King. Just the temporal power in the temporal vortex would have been enough to kill us. Kea patted his chest as he rejoiced beside Jianshun. He felt like he had a chance at life. Suddenly, Jianshun became serious. He looked at Kea in confusion and asked, "Oh right, Kea, how did you discover the Azure Peng King before I did?" Jianshun was also puzzled by this. He knew that Kea was like him, able to sense the situation in the outside world. However, the senses Kea had just displayed were actually even more terrifying than him, who was half a master of the Inata Tower. He struggled to accept this. Kea frowned as she pondered. She did not know how to explain this matter to Jianshun, because even she herself did not know the reason for the sudden elevation of her soul. I don't know what's going on, but I suddenly felt something. After thinking for a long time, Kea said. Jianshun nodded and did not continue to ask. From the various signs that Kea had shown, he had long suspected that Kea was the reincarnation of some expert. He naturally attributed all of this to Kea's past life. After all, even he was a reincarnator. His soul had been enveloped by the azulate swords, allowing him to descend upon the Tian Yuan continent. Brother Jianshun, why have you come in here as well? At this moment, a voice filled with joy rang out from afar. The divine king of light, Xian Ming, radiated with bright light as he shot over from afar like a bolt of lightning. He arrived beside Jianshun and Kea in the blink of an eye, smiling at the two of them. "Sai, we're currently being hunted down by the Azure Peng King. We've fled into a spatial crack now. We have no other choice but to hide here." Jianshun sighed gently. A sliver of guilt appeared in his eyes as he looked at Xian Ming. He knew that he had probably dragged Xian Ming into this. After all, With the Azure Pung King's personality, he probably would not spare Xianming once he learned that he was even slightly related to Xianming. What? The Azure Pung King? One of the 4 heavenly kings of the Azure Brilliance Mountain on the Lone Heaven Plain, the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? Xianming's face changed drastically as he paled in fright. That's right, it's him, said Jianshun. He had heard many rumors about the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King on planet Tianming. God damn it. Of all the people you could provoke, why did you have to provoke the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance? I've heard my father talk about the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance before. My father said that the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance is unruly, petty, and vengeful. He's known for being difficult to deal with in the Saints' world. Not only is he powerful, but his speed is unmatched as well. He's said to be unrivaled. Even peak experts who have grasped the laws of space may not be able to capture him unless they can completely overwhelm him. Nothing good will come out of provoking the heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. We're in trouble now, Xianming growled. His face was ugly as he worried deeply. You don't need to worry too much. All you need to do is hide here. Even if the tower ends up in the Azure Pung King's hands, you'll be safe for a short period of time. Moreover, the Azure Pung King should be trapped in a temporal vortex right now. The temporal vortex should be able to trap him for a while, giving us some time to catch our breath, said Jianshun. He knew that the Inata Tower had been completely exposed after what happened on planet Tianming. He guessed that the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing would arrive very soon if nothing unexpected happened. Even if we can trap the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance for a few years, or even a few decades, it's impossible for us to escape from the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance with our strength. Xianming was like an ant on a hot pan. He constantly paced around as he felt uneasy. Let's go to a place where even the Azure Pung King doesn't dare to mess around, like the 7 sacred plains of the Saints' world, said Jianshun calmly. The first place he thought of was the Prosper Plain, one of the 49 great plains where the heavenly palace of Bishing resided. The 7 sacred plains were extremely supreme existences in the Saints' world. Every single one of them possessed a grand exalt. As a result, the 7 sacred plains were named after the 7 grand exalts of the Saints' world in the past. Xianming immediately riled up when he heard that. He said excitedly, "Got it. I'll tell you a good place to go. We're not going to the 7 sacred plains. We'll go to the Desolate Plain. Our Radiant Saint Hall just happens to be on the Desolate Plain." Is the Desolate Plain even safer than the 7 sacred plains? Jianshun was doubtful. Xianming sniggered and said confidently, "I know what you're worried about, but you don't have to worry. As long as you go to the Desolate Plain, the Azure Pung King won't dare to mess around. That's the Azure Pung King's forbidden zone. If he dares to set foot on the Desolate Plain, he might not be able to keep himself alive. Since your Desolate Plain possesses such an expert, why has your Radiant Saint Hall been forced into such a miserable state by the great demon you speak of?" Jianshun asked. Xianming immediately deflated like a balloon when he heard that. He sighed. That existence doesn't care about the matters of our Radiant Saint Hall, let alone the fact that we've only lost a few divine King Radiant Saints. Many large organizations on the Desolate Plain think that even if our Radiant Saint Hall is destroyed, it has nothing to do with them. No one is willing to offend such an expert for us, even if they're organizations that are on good terms with our Radiant Saint Hall. Jianshun, let's go to the Desolate Plain. Since the Radiant Saint Hall is on the Desolate Plain, there's a reason why you have to go, Caius said. P.S. A picture of the twin swords has been posted. Do you want to see the true appearance of the twin swords? Then please follow Xiaoyao's WeChat account, XingXingCiao110, where you can directly search for Xinxing Xiaoyao's pen name. Once you follow him and check your history, you will see the twin swords posted. Chapter 2275. All right, let's go to the Desolate Plain then. Jianshun hesitated slightly before agreeing firmly. There was indeed a reason why he had to go to the Desolate Plain. It was because the Radiant Saint Hall was on the Desolate Plain. In reality, ever since he came to the Saints' world, he had struggled to make any progress with his Radiant Saint force. Even now, His level of Radiant Saint Master remained at the same level as when he was on the Tian Yuan continent. It was not that he did not want to make progress, but he did not have a cultivation method for the future. It was not that he had not considered creating his own cultivation method during this period of time. It was just that every single cultivation method would take him a very long time to create. He would only be able to create it after countless simulations and experiments. As a result, creating his own cultivation method was clearly not suitable for Jianshan. I have a star map here. It clearly marks out the exact locations of the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets of the Saint's World, as well as some forbidden areas that are impossible to set foot in. Xianming was immediately overjoyed when he heard that Jianshan had decided to go to the Desolate Plain. He immediately passed his star map to Jianshan as if he was afraid that Jianshan would take the wrong path. The Desolate Plain was Xianming's home, so Jianshan could completely understand what Xianming was feeling. He accepted the star map from Xianming and said to Kea, "There's no time to lose. Let's go right now. We have to get to the Desolate Plain before the Azure Peng King breaks free." Afterwards, Jianshan controlled the Inata Tower to search for a tunnel in the spatial crack. In the Saint's World, he and Kea could barely rip open space and enter this place with their combined efforts. However, Jianshan and Kea would never dare to do that in the spatial crack, even if Jianshan's chaotic body had reached the 13th layer. This was because this place was just too dangerous. It could be described as dangerous at every step. Even the slightest ripple of energy could become a fuse that would lead to even greater danger. If they used their full strength here, the consequences would probably be terrifying before they could rip open space. After all, they were not as terrifying as the Azure Peng King. They did not fear any of the threats here. Therefore, if they wanted to leave, they had to find another way. However, Jianshan had the Inata Tower. As long as he did not venture out alone, he could go anywhere in the spatial crack. As a result, he found a spatial crack that led to the outside world before long. The crack was very small, only a meter long. Without any hesitation, Jianshan immediately shrank the Inata Tower to the size of a finger and charged out of the tiny crack. However, as soon as they arrived in the space of the Saint's World, powerful ripples of energy swept over. Not far away, an unusually large space beast was fighting fiercely with an old man who was covered in blood. Both the space beast and the old man were extraordinarily powerful. The shockwaves of energy from the battle formed a terrifying storm that swept through the starry sky. It shattered the starry sky and created densely packed spatial cracks. The Inata Tower had charged out from one of the spatial cracks. Jianshan did not stick his nose into the matter. He hid himself carefully and charged into space in the distance. This was because he could not deal with either the space beast or the old man. The old man was completely suppressed by the space beast. He was fighting with his full strength, so he clearly did not discover the extremely small Inata Tower. In the end, the Inata Tower basically slipped away under Jianshan's control. Fortunately, I just happened to be near planet Scarlet Cloud on the 81 Great Planets. With my current speed, I should be able to get there in a day. I hope I can make it in time. Jianshan stowed the Inata Tower away in outer space. He took out the small spaceship that Xianming had given him and unfurled his star map. He hurried towards planet Scarlet Cloud as quickly as he could. Xianming's spaceship was of a rather high grade, so it moved extremely quickly. Originally, Jianshan had predicted that it would take him a day, but in the end, it only took him 4 hours to arrive on planet Scarlet Cloud. This time, Jianshan did not take Kea with him. After changing his appearance, he set foot on planet Scarlet Cloud alone, directly arriving before a teleportation formation that could cross planes. The Desolate Plain costs 505 colored divine crystals per person. Remember, no living beings can exist in your spatial treasures, or once the formation detects them, the consequences will be extremely severe. The guard in charge of the teleportation formation warned Jianshan sternly. Jianshan was secretly stunned when he heard the price. He knew that teleportation formations were very expensive, enough to stump even primordial realm experts, but he had never thought it would be so expensive. 100 supreme gray divine crystals were equivalent to a single one-color divine crystal. 10 one-color divine crystals were equivalent to a single two-color divine crystal, and 10 two-color divine crystals were equivalent to a single three-color divine crystal. So on and so forth. Exchanging for a single five-color divine crystal would cost 10,000 one-color divine crystals. In terms of supreme gray divine crystals, a single five-color divine crystal would be equivalent to 1,000,000 supreme gray divine crystals. Yet a single teleportation would cost 500 five-color divine crystals. It had to be mentioned that the price of a single teleportation was ridiculously high. Jianshun sucked in a deep breath and handed over the 500 five-color divine crystals rather painfully. Afterwards, he made his way towards the teleportation formation emotionlessly. The guards near the teleportation formation paid close attention to Jianshun. Along the way to the teleportation formation, there would be a special formation that could detect whether or not someone was using a spatial container to pass through. In the Saints world, basically all the controllers of teleportation formations would forbid anyone from using a spatial container to pass through in order to protect their own interests. This did not affect the stability of the teleportation formation. It was only to protect their interests. It was also for this reason that many powerful clans and organizations in the Saints world would rather travel through endless distances on spaceships than use interplanar teleportation formations. However, Jianshun was not worried that the formation would discover that he had brought people with him. After all, the Inata Tower was a supreme god artifact. It could not be detected by any formation. He had even left behind the Divine Hall, where Qing Yishuan and He Ye had been placed in the Inata Tower. In the end, Jianshun successfully passed through the formation and left planet Scarlet Cloud through the teleportation formation, making his way to the desolate plain. When Jianshun left planet Scarlet Cloud, the Azure Pung King finally emerged from the temporal vortex in the spatial crack. His face became extremely ugly as he looked at the Inata Tower that had vanished. Even the traces have vanished. Looks like I've been trapped for quite some time. However, I have a droplet of your blood. No matter where you go, you won't be able to escape from me, the Azure Pung King said through gritted teeth. In the Tianyuan family of the Dong, and province of the southern region of the Cloud Plain, Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin sat before a small table in an extremely warmly decorated room. They ate fruits as they chatted. At this moment, a black-robed old man with an ordinary appearance silently appeared behind Xiao Ling. He moved like a ghost. The old man's appearance was discovered by Xiao Jin, who sat before Xiao Ling as soon as possible. Xiao Jin's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he immediately stood up. He called out, "Who are you?" The old man was kind. He stared at Xiao Ling curiously, but he was puzzled inside. He thought, this girl is only at reciprocity. May I ask why Master wants me to personally receive her? Ah, Grandpa, who are you? How did you get in here? Xiao Ling discovered the old man behind her as well. Her innocent face was filled with surprise. The old man said nothing, nor did he give off any presence. He seemed just like an ordinary person. He studied Xiao Ling for a while before carefully taking out a strand of hair. This strand of hair was held in his hands as if it was extremely important. Moreover, there was a respectful expression on his face. Chapter 2276. However, the moment she saw the strand of hair, Xiao Ling became stunned. She stared at the strand of hair in the old man's hands with her innocent, bright eyes. Her eyes gradually became red and swollen, quickly becoming filled with tears. In the next moment, Xiao Ling suddenly burst into tears. Her tears flowed out like a fountain, filled with longing as they flowed down her cheeks. Master, Master, where are you? Do you not want Xiao Ling anymore? Have you already forgotten about Xiao Ling? Xiao Ling really misses you. Xiao Ling took the strand of hair from the old man's hands and gently pressed it against her face. She sobbed as she spoke. Her voice was filled with longing. Xiao Jin felt sorry for Xiao Ling when he saw how sorrowful she was. He suddenly looked at the old man of unknown origins and asked, "Where did you get this strand of hair?" Xiao Jin had been with Xiao Ling for so long, So he obviously knew that his sister Xiao Ling had a master in the past. As soon as he saw Xiao Ling holding the strand of hair, he suddenly thought of his master. Naturally, Xiao Jin understood that the strand of hair actually came from the master that Xiao Ling spoke of. The black-robed old man didn't pay any attention to Xiao Jin. At this moment, Xiao Jin was just a figurehead in his eyes. He didn't care about Xiao Jin at all. All of his attention was focused on Xiao Ling, who was holding onto her hair and crying. Little sister, feel carefully. Is the presence on the strand of hair really your master? Don't be mistaken, the old man said sternly. The black-robed old man spoke with a cautious expression. His gaze toward Xiao Ling had also become extremely strange. It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. This is my master's presence. This is my master's presence. I can't be wrong about my master's presence, Xiao Ling said firmly. Xiao Ling said with absolute certainty. There were tears on her face as she looked at the black-robed old man with hopeful eyes. She sobbed, "Grandpa, please tell me where you got my master's hair. I beg you, I really want to see my master." Xiao Ling's voice was filled with eagerness. Her longing for her master had already accumulated in her heart for over 1,000,000 years. Even when she had come to the saint's world with Jianshen, her main objective was to find her master. This was because in Xiao Ling's life, her master was like her father. He was an extremely important figure in her life. No one could replace him. The old man sucked in a deep breath. His gaze towards Xiao Ling underwent a drastic change. After a moment of silence, he said, "I'm Cheng Ming. I'm a servant of my master. You can just call me by my name. As for this strand of hair, my master took it from him and gave it to me. He told me to come to the cloud plane with this strand of hair and take you away. If you want to see your master, please come with me." "Your master is Mo Tianyan?" Xiao Jin asked. He stared at Cheng Ming in surprise. He was not unfamiliar with Mo Tianyan. He was a legendary figure in the history of the Tian Yuan continent, one of the 4 sovereigns of ancient times. His name had spread for over 1,000,000 years, influencing generations after generations. Cheng Ming frowned. He glared at Xiao Jin in a rather displeased manner and said coldly, "I don't dare to talk about my master's name so casually. Don't ask around either." "All right, I'll go with you. I want to see my master as soon as possible, but I need to take you with me." Xiao Ling immediately agreed. In her heart, her master's position was unshakable. No one could replace him. Now that she had finally received news of her master, she was tempted to fly to his side immediately. "All right, we'll be setting off immediately. Go say goodbye to your friends outside so that they won't misunderstand," Cheng Ming said as he glanced outside. Xiao Ling nodded. She suddenly became passionate as she ran out in excitement and eagerness. She wanted to bid farewell to the Tianyuan family. However, as soon as Xiao Ling pushed open the door, she discovered a white-robed, scholarly, middle-aged man standing outside with his hands behind his back. Caught off guard, Xiao Ling almost ran into him. Behind a middle-aged man stood Ming Dong and Yun Xiaoyan. "Why are you guys here?" Xiao Ling asked in surprise as she wiped the tears off her face. "An uninvited guest has barged into the Tianyuan family and directly entered Sister Xiao Ling's room. How can I not worry?" Ming Dong said from behind the middle-aged man. His gaze suddenly landed on the black-robed Cheng Ming behind Xiao Ling. He walked over steadily with his hands behind his back. Ming Dong became stern and said coldly, "Who are you? State your intentions." A sliver of surprise appeared in Cheng Ming's eyes when he saw that the person who had spoken was actually Ming Dong. He glanced at Ming Dong deeply before pointing at Xiao Ling. He said, "My master is her master. I've come under my master's orders to get her." "Is your master Mo Tianyan?" Ming Dong's eyes narrowed. He could not help but become stern when Mo Tianyan was mentioned. He asked, "How can you prove it?" "I can prove that the presence on this strand of hair is my master's." "I can't be wrong. I want to see my master immediately," Xiao Ling said impatiently. She seemed eager before immediately running away from the middle-aged man. She bid farewell to the people she was familiar with in the Tianyuan family as quickly as she could. "May I ask where Senior Mo Tianyan is and how I can find him? I want to pay him a personal visit." Ming Dong clasped his fist at Cheng Ming after Xiao Ling had left. Clearly, he believed the middle-aged man a little more. He knew that the cultivation of the old man in front of him was very strong. Even the divine general beside him had to treat him seriously. Such a strong person would not lie. Ming Dong was filled with admiration for Mo Tianyan. After all, he came from the Tianyuan continent as well, so he had heard many rumors about Mo Tianyan. He had been greatly influenced by Mo Tianyan. Forgive me for not being able to tell you that. I can only tell my master that you want to visit him, said Cheng Ming. Ming Dong tried to learn more about Mo Tianyan from Cheng Ming, but Cheng Ming remained tight-lipped, so Ming Dong was unable to learn anything. Cheng Ming had even refused to admit that his master was the Mo Tianyan Ming Dong spoke of. He had always referred to him as master. All right, let's go. I want to see my master as soon as possible. Very soon, Xiao Ling ran over with lightning speed. Her sudden departure alarmed many of the upper echelon of the Tianyuan family. Not only had the greatest elder of the Tianyuan family, Shi Yu, personally come, but even Si Yu had come as well. Cheng Ming nodded and said nothing more. With a gentle wave of his hand, he vanished with Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin. Who is he? Not only can I not sense his cultivation at all, but I also sensed nothing when he barged into the Tianyuan family. An old man behind Xiao Ling said in surprise after Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin had digested their food. He was a subject of the Shi Empire. He was an infinite prime and had been specially sent by Emperor Shi to protect Shi Yu. He's already a peak chaotic prime. He's only a step away from becoming a grand prime, so you naturally can't sense him, said the scholarly middle-aged man beside Ming Dong. What? Peak chaotic prime? All the upper echelon of the Tianyuan family paled in fright when they heard that. They were shocked. Uncle Ming, have you heard of the name Mo Tianyan before? Ming Dong asked the divine general. The middle-aged man referred to as Uncle Ming shook his head and said, I've never heard of the name Mo Tianyan before. However, since he can make a peak chaotic prime as a servant, he must be a grand prime and extremely powerful. Perhaps Mo Tianyan isn't his real name. He might have other names in the Saint world. Outside the cloud plane, Cheng Ming had already left with Xiao Ling and Xiao Jin. He hurried through outer space. He did not use a spatial battleship. Instead, he strolled through outer space as if he was taking a stroll. He moved extremely quickly. He vanished with each step, traversing worlds. The stars in the sky rapidly changed behind him. In just a few steps, the tremendous piece of land that was the cloud plane had shrunk to the size of a palm, hovering silently in outer space. I never thought that the grand elder of the heavenly demon religion and the war demon, one of the 5 infamous war generals, would personally come to the cloud plane. However, since you've come, why leave in such a hurry? At this moment, a chilling laugh rang out in outer space. A tremendous amount of demonic aura surged before Cheng Ming, radiating with a terrifying presence that could destroy the world. The heavenless demon exalt. Cheng Ming stopped. He stared sharply at the ball of demon chi in front of him and let out a roar. His expression turned gloomy. The war demon appeared beside Cheng Ming. He stared at the churning demonic aura before him sternly and said sternly, the heavenless demon exalt has come with ill intentions. Grand Elder, take them away first. I'll bring up the rear. P.S. The picture of the zither of the demonic cry has been posted. There will be more pictures to be posted. To those who want to take a look, please follow Xiaoyao's WeChat account, XingXingCiao110. Chapter 2277. Cheng Ming became extremely stern. He had an ill omen when he came. Now that the heavenless demon exalt had suddenly blocked his path, Cheng Ming sensed that something was wrong. I should have stayed behind to fight to the death with you, but the little girl I brought with me was ordered by Master to be brought back safely. Thus, she can't be harmed in the slightest. War demon, be careful. Remember, don't clash with him head-on. No matter what, you have to leave behind a fragment of your soul so that Master can revive you in the future. Cheng Ming instructed. Then, using a secret technique, he rushed in another direction as fast as he could. Great Elder, I came here especially for you. How can you just turn around and leave without saying anything? Am I, Wu Qian, really that scared? The heavenless demon Exalt snickered. With that, terrifying demonic aura erupted, shattering space and causing the stars in the sky to dim. It condensed into a huge hand that reached towards Changming. When the palm landed, endless energy surged out, sealing off the surroundings. It caused Changming's figure to come to a halt. His attempt at escape slowed down as well, as if he had been imprisoned by an invisible energy. Battle blood ignition. At this moment, the war demon who had come with Changming let out a furious roar. With a powerful aura, he directly used a divine tier battle skill. His essence, qi, and soul soared as a black flame burned on his body. He directly punched out. This punch possessed an imposing aura and shocking might. It suddenly smashed out with an indomitable momentum, shattering the starry sky and causing the river of stars in the sky to vanish. At the same time, Changming saw how the heavenless demon Exalt had kept him busy, so he fought back with his full strength. He did not hold back at all as a peak chaotic prime. He directly used a god-tier battle skill, sending his strongest strike towards the heavenless demon Exalt's hand condensed from demonic aura. Changming and the war demon's full-powered strike collided with the heavenless demon Exalt's hand at basically the same time, erupting with a deafening boom. The collision this time was truly devastating. The entire space was collapsing piece by piece, turning into true nothingness. However, the difference in strength was just too great. Changming and the war demon used their god-tier battle skills to clash with the heavenless demon Exalt. Not only did they fail to block the heavenless demon Exalt's casual attack, but they ended up heavily injured instead. The heavenless demon Exalt's hand, condensed from demonic aura, struck them. Bang! The war devil was the first to be hit. Its entire body cracked open and exploded. Blood rained down from the sky. His physical body had been destroyed, leaving only a ball of primordial spirit floating in the void, emitting a dim light. Changming's fate was no better. The medium-quality god artifact he wore was dim, and his face was extremely pale. His entire right arm had vanished. Changming and the war demon were only chaotic primes, while the heavenless demon Exalt was a fourth heavenly layer grand prime. He was a mid-grand prime. The difference in strength was just too great. They were not on the same level at all. As a result, the battle was completely one-sided. Great Elder, hurry up and run. The war demon's soul shrieked out. His dim soul suddenly shone with blinding light. Even all the blood in the void was ignited at that moment. Black, demonic flames roared, gathering over from all directions. They charged towards the heavenless demon Exalt fearlessly. Boom! Suddenly, with a great rumble, the war demon's soul and all the demonic blood unleashed an earth-shaking might, exploding with the heavenless demon Exalt. This time around, there were no energy ripples being emitted. Even the deafening roar only lasted for an instant before disappearing. The war demon's explosion was just too terrifying. It formed a black hole in space, greedily devouring everything in the surroundings. Whether it was light or energy, they were all devoured by the black hole. The war demon, Changming cried out sorrowfully. He looked at the tiny black hole in the distance as hatred filled his eyes. Afterwards, he turned around and left. He did not dare to hesitate at all. The power of the explosion is indeed extraordinary. It can probably injure first heavenly layer grand primes and threaten second heavenly layer grand primes. However, it's still far too weak to me, far too weak. The heavenless demon Exalt's voice rang out. He stood near the black hole. No matter how terrifying the suction from the black hole was, it was unable to make the heavenless demon Exalt move at all. Even the corner of his clothes remained unruffled. With a gentle wave of his hand, he swiped at the space there, and the black hole collapsed loudly as if it had been crushed by an unimaginable force. Grand Elder, hand over the method for your heavenly demon religion to condense blood and soul beads, and I'll let you go, the heavenless demon Exalt said calmly. He spoke steadily. Having become a fourth heavenly layer grand prime, He was the undisputed greatest expert on the cloud plane. He did not fear the great elder behind the heavenly demon religion at all. This was because, in his opinion, the great elder behind the heavenly demon religion was only a third heavenly layer grand prime at most. Even if he had advanced further and reached the fourth heavenly layer, he would only be on par with him. Moreover, the other reason why he dared to attack the heavenly demon religion was because, according to the reliable information he possessed, only the great elder of the heavenly demon religion was a grand prime. He, the heavenless demon Exalt, was not alone. Behind him was the Tian Empire, as well as a few peak clans that had allied themselves with the Tian Empire. The current Tian Empire had basically gathered half of the peak forces on the cloud plane. Heavenless demon Exalt, you won't have a good end for becoming an enemy of our Empyrean demon cult. Master won't spare you, Chengming bellowed out furiously before directly entering a spatial crack. If that's the case, you can go die. As for your great elder of the heavenly demon religion, once the cloud plane is united, I'll naturally go and meet him. I'll obtain the method to refine blood and soul beads from him. The heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. The heavenless demon Exalt said coldly. Baleful aura swirled around him as he followed Chengming into the spatial crack. He extended a finger towards the fleeing Chengming. In the next moment, endless demonic aura suddenly surged out from Chengming's surroundings. The demonic aura enveloped his body like maggots, devouring Chengming's flesh at a visible rate. Vaguely, one could see a dense swarm of demonic insects emerging from the demonic chi. Your body and soul can't be wasted like the war demon. It's perfect for feeding my demonic soul insects. The heavenless demon Exalt smiled cruelly. Heavenless demon Exalt, just wait for my master's fury. Chengming was decisive. Chengming was quite decisive. He immediately abandoned his physical body and fled with his nascent spirit, wrapping around a divine hall as he fled. The heavenless demon Exalt's eyes lit up slightly when he saw Chengming take the divine hall away. He smiled gently. You don't even want a space ring, but you want to take a divine hall with you. It looks like this divine hall is extremely important to you. The heavenless demon Exalt extended his hand from afar. Demonic aura surged, turning into a demonic hand that was tens of thousands of meters wide. It destroyed the spatial storms and streams of energy along the way, grabbing Chengming's soul in an extremely domineering manner. Afterwards, he applied some force, and Chengming's soul immediately collapsed. It turned into a rain of light that scattered into the spatial crack, gradually dispersing. The heavenless demon Exalt ignored Chengming. In his eyes, Chengming's soul had already been destroyed. He looked at the divine hall before him and revealed a sliver of interest. Afterwards, he used 2 fingers to clamp the fist-sized divine hall between them. With a slight tug, the divine hall immediately shattered, and Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling, who had been placed in the divine hall by Chengming, were revealed. Who are you? Where's Grandpa Chengming? Xiao Ling asked timidly as she stared at the heavenless demon Exalt, whose demonic aura surged around him in confusion. She could sense an aura that terrified her from the heavenless demon Exalt. Xiao Jin also stood beside Xiao Ling uneasily. He stared at the heavenless demon Exalt closely, but he said nothing. The aura from the heavenless demon Exalt filled him with dread. The heavenless demon Exalt was clearly stunned when he saw Xiao Jin and Xiao Ling suddenly appear before him. He felt very confused and even disbelief. The Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult did not even want his space ring. He had to exhaust the power of his soul to flee with the divine hall. Clearly, there was something extremely important in the divine hall. The heavenless demon Exalt even suspected that the Grand Elder had come to the cloud plane this time, mainly for the divine hall. But why were there 2 little fellows whose cultivations were completely unpresentable? Has the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion come specially for the 2 of you? The heavenless demon Exalt pondered. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. In the end, he revealed a sinister smile. He. Since that's the case, I'll keep the 2 of you alive for now. Perhaps you'll be of great use in the future. Chapter 2278. After the heavenless demon Exalt left, a weak speck of light suddenly appeared in the chaotic spatial crack. It gave off an extremely weak pulse of the soul. This was a sliver of the soul of the Grand Elder of the Empyrean demon cult, Chang Ming. Although the heavenless demon Exalt had pulverized Chang Ming's soul, causing it to collapse and disperse into the chaotic spatial crack, Chang Ming was not truly dead. Instead, he managed to preserve a sliver of his soul through a secret technique his master had passed on to him. This wisp of Chang Ming's true soul disappeared in a flash. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak in white robes currently sat before an extremely precious white jade table with 6 people of various ages on the cloud plane on the central region. They discussed how to deal with the Tian Empire. Even though the 6 people sitting at the same table as the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak had all concealed their presences, making them seem like ordinary people, they were actually peak experts who stood at the apex of the cloud plane. They were terrifying figures who could make the entire cloud plane tremble with a stomp of their feet. The heavenless demon Exalt has already killed the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion and one of the 5 great generals, the war demon. It looks like the heavenless demon Exalt is confident about dealing with the great elder behind the heavenly demon religion who rarely shows himself, said an ordinary old man. The one who spoke was an extremely ordinary-looking old man. He was very old, and his back was hunched. The wrinkles on his face had already been squeezed together, and he gave off a feeling that he was about to die. The old man was the ancestor of the Tong family, one of the peak clans on the cloud plane, Tongwuming. The more powerful the heavenless demon Exalt is, the worse our situation will be. He doesn't fear the great elder of the heavenly demon religion. This isn't good news for us, said a middle-aged man in green robes with a resolute expression. He was the ancestor of the God's Fallen clan, Luo Mantion. The Luotian clan was also one of the top forces in the Cloud State and was located in the North region. In my opinion, the heavenless demon Exalt is trying to show off his strength to us. He killed the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion with lightning speed, using his invincibility to show us that he does not fear the heavenly demon religion. He's trying to warn us not to put up any pointless resistance. Another old man said with a heavy voice. His complexion was very ugly. This person was Lian Wuji, the ancestor of the Fire God clan, one of the top forces in the Cloud State. Peak Lord, how confident are you in defeating the heavenless demon Exalt? Zhou Zhidao, the founding ancestor of the Heaven and Earth sect, asked. Hearing Zhou Zhidao's words, everyone turned their gazes towards the peak master of Heaven's Link Peak. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak was a peak 3rd heavenly layer Grand Prime. He had always been the strongest on the cloud plane. He was a person of great prestige on the cloud plane, and he was admired by many peak clans. If there was anyone on the cloud plane who possessed the right to take on the heavenless demon Exalt, it would definitely be the peak master of the Heavens Link Peak. This was because the other Grand Primes on the cloud plane were all at the 1st or 2nd heavenly layer. The difference between them and the heavenless demon Exalt who had reached the 4th heavenly layer was just too great. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak stared at the depths of outer space, where the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion fought the heavenless demon Exalt. This place was extremely distant from the cloud plane, so distant that the vast piece of land on the cloud plane had become a palm-sized fragment that hovered in outer space. This distance had already exceeded the range of Chaotic Prime's senses. Only Grand Primes could sense what was happening there. A strange light flickered through the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak's eyes. He said, I have complete confidence in defeating him at the same level of cultivation, but he's reached the 4th heavenly layer before me now. If I face him again, I have no chance at victory. I can only keep him busy for a while at most, but as time goes on, I'll still be defeated. What do we do then? The Tian Empire already has 3 Grand Primes, and a few peak clans have already stood on the same side as the Tian Empire. In terms of peak experts, the Tian Empire is no less than us. Coupled with the heavenless demon Exalt Sai, the founding ancestor of the cosmic sect, Zhou Zhidao, sighed at the sky. His face was filled with worry. Aside from the Lord of the Heavens Link Peak, the other ancestors gathered there were all sunken. The current situation was not good for them at all. Are we really going to submit to the Tian Empire? From today onwards, we're going to follow the Tian Empire's lead? Luo Man Tian sighed gently. Everyone present was an expert who reigned over an entire region. They had long since become accustomed to commanding the world, yet they had to lower their heads and follow the Tian Empire's lead. They struggled to accept this. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak remained calm. He said, "There's no need to worry. The heavenless demon Exalt is no longer a concern. May I ask what the Peak Lord means?" The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak pointed at the distant space where the heavenless demon Exalt and the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion had stopped him. He said, "The heavenless demon Exalt has completely offended the heavenly demon religion. Moreover, he seems to have taken something extremely important from the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion. I believe the Great Elder of the heavenly demon religion will personally come to the Cloud Plain before long. The Great Elder behind the heavenly demon religion can stop the heavenless demon Exalt." The eyes of all the Peak experts gathered there narrowed. The Lord of the Heavens Link Peak seemed to think back to what he had witnessed in the past. Deep fear immediately appeared in his eyes, and he said, "You've underestimated the Great Elder of the heavenly demon religion far too much. He's even more terrifying than you imagine him to be. Since the heavenless demon Exalt has offended the Great Elder of the heavenly demon religion, his fate has already been decided. What we need to do right now is stop the attacks of the Tian Empire before the Great Elder of the heavenly demon religion arrives. However, just in case, I suggest you evacuate some clansmen from the Cloud Plain as soon as possible and leave behind some descendants. If that's the case, I'll go back and make arrangements immediately. Our formal conflict with the Tian Empire will happen very soon. We don't have much time left. I hope the mysterious Great Elder of the heavenly demon religion can arrive in time." Within a majestic divine hall in an unknown region of the Saints' world, a sliver of the soul of the Grand Elder of the heavenly demon religion, Cheng Ming, had already entered the divine hall with a flash. "Master." Very soon, a strand of Cheng Ming's soul arrived before the tightly shut secret room. It transformed into a fist-sized figure and knelt before the secret room, trembling. "What's going on?" A deep voice came from the secret chamber. "We were attacked by the heavenless demon Exalt." Cheng Ming gave a simple explanation of what had happened. Rumble. With a deep sound, the tightly shut door of the secret room slowly opened. Immediately, a cold, killing force spread out from inside. A black-robed, resolute, and handsome middle-aged man walked out with a sunken face. He glared at Cheng Ming's soul and growled, "Where's the person I wanted you to receive?" She was taken away by the heavenless demon Exalt," Cheng Ming said fearfully. "The heavenless demon Exalt." At that moment, the middle-aged man's gaze became extremely terrifying and shocking. Surging killing intent radiated from him, and even his eyes became bloodthirsty red. At this moment, he gave off the feeling of a bloodthirsty beast. Cheng Ming, who knelt in the air as a sliver of soul, became even more uneasy. He had followed his master for so many years, but he had never seen him so furious. "I can't wait any longer. My original body needs to break free immediately." The middle-aged man's face was extremely sunken. He got Cheng Ming to reconstruct his body before turning around and entering the room. The door to the room closed once again. At the same time, on a desolate planet filled with deathly stillness in a galaxy extremely far away from here, there was a middle-aged man in white robes who looked exactly the same as the master Cheng Ming spoke of. He sat in the depths of the planet with his legs crossed. Chapter 2279. At this moment, Jianshun had already arrived on the desolate plain of the 49 Great Plains of the Saints' world. He currently sat in an inn in a bustling city in the central region of the desolate plain. He casually ordered a few dishes and tasted them all by himself. There were quite a few people dining in the inn. Everyone drank their fill of fine wine as they chatted loudly with great interest. They talked about the interesting things that had happened across the desolate plain in the past few days, as well as the various rumors they had heard. Jinshin had already learned a lot about the general situation on the desolate plain from Xianming. However, it had been far too long since Xianming had returned to the desolate plain, so the information he learned from Xianming was from a very long time ago. As a result, Jinshan needed to reacquaint himself with the current desolate plain after setting foot on it for the first time. After all, he did not plan on staying on the desolate plain for just a few days. If nothing unexpected happened, he would be staying on the desolate plain for quite some time. In 3 years, the Radiant Saint Hall will choose a new chosen saint again. I wonder who will become the next chosen saint. It's said that there are 5 9-star prodigies in the Radiant Saint Hall right now, and 3 of them have gone from Class 1 to Class 9 within 1,000 years. It's said that they're currently comprehending the second law of Radiant Saint Masters, the laws of the Hallowed. They're making progress towards becoming Hallowed Saint Masters. They should become extremely powerful Hallowed Saint Masters before long. Hallowed Saint Masters are existences with extremely great battle prowess. There are very few people who are their opponents at the same level of cultivation. Only the supreme prodigies nurtured by large organizations have the right to fight against Hallowed Saint Masters. The heavens are fair. Even though Hallowed Saint Masters possess great battle prowess, they have to pay a price. It'll be extremely difficult for them to advance. How long do you think it will take for the 3 9-star geniuses to comprehend the second law of Radiant Saint Masters and become Hallowed Saint Masters? At this moment, the discussion to the side attracted Jinshin's attention. He turned his head slightly and casually glanced over. There were a few white-robed young people who seemed to be Radiant Saint Masters with a single glance. They were discussing some matters regarding Radiant Saint Masters enthusiastically. Jinshin was no stranger to the Holy Sons and 9-star geniuses. He had already learned about them from Xianming. The chosen saint was the most outstanding person selected from all the Radiant Saint Masters of the Radiant Saint Hall after many rounds of selection and elimination. Afterwards, the Radiant Saint Hall would use all the resources of the Radiant Saint Hall to nurture the most capable leaders of the younger generation. Once he was chosen as the chosen saint, he would be an existence that stood above all in the Radiant Saint Hall. Not only would it be a symbol of status and authority, but it would also be the foundation for his future. He would possess tremendous room for growth and a glorious future. However, becoming a chosen saint would be extremely difficult. In the past, even with Xianming's talent, he did not have the right to become a chosen saint. 9-star geniuses were a division of the Radiant Saint Hall's talent for Radiant Saint Masters. Every single person who could be called a genius possessed extraordinary talent. The weakest among them were 1-star geniuses, while the strongest were 9-star geniuses. However, even 1-star geniuses possessed a certain amount of status in the Radiant Saint Hall. Their conditions were so great that they could not be compared to regular disciples. As for Hallowed Saint Masters, they were like Xianming. They had grasped the technique to transform Radiant Saint Force. So not only did Radiant Saint Force possess healing properties, but it also possessed great offensive power. Jinshin was only a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master at most right now. He was not a Hallowed Saint Master yet. After staying for a while longer, Jinshin saw that he was unable to obtain any useful information. He tossed a few high-grade divine crystals onto the table and left the inn. He basically understood everything he needed to know about the situation on the desolate plain. The desolate plain was also split into 5 regions, and the Radiant Saint Hall resided in the central region. It was not far from where he was right now. Jinshan directly made his way to the Radiant Saint Hall. Along the way, he discovered many wanted posters plastered all over the streets. To no surprise, he was among them. However, the only person who had issued the posters was the solitary sword ancestor. The Azure Pung King's wanted poster did not seem to appear on the desolate plain. Aside from him, there was another young man who was also wanted. His portrait was plastered all over the streets. The young man was called Aoyama. He only seemed to be in his mid-20s, and he was quite handsome. The people who had issued the wanted posters for him were the Radiant Saint Hall. Aoyama, from the Martial Soul Mountain. He ranks first under the Divine King. Jinshin's gaze became extremely deep as he read the description of Aoyama. Soon after he arrived on the desolate plain, he had already learnt that the martial soul lineage was enemies with the Radiant Saint Hall. Their relationship was like fire and water. The reason why Aoyama was wanted by the Radiant Saint Hall was because he had killed a hallowed Saint Master who had condensed a soul tree from the Radiant Saint Hall. The cultivation system of Radiant Saint Masters was different from fighters. Hallowed Saint Masters who had condensed soul trees were equivalent to primordial realm experts. It's rare for Hallowed Saint Masters to find an opponent at the same level of cultivation. A Hallowed Saint Master who had condensed a soul tree and reached the primordial realm was actually slain by Aoyama, who was only a Divine King. Aoyama really is the strongest under the Divine King after all, Jinshin thought. He could not help but compare Aoyama to Shui Yunlan. Shui Yunlan's strength could also be described as invincible in the Divine King's realm. Her strength was on full display in the Poseidon Palace. When he passed by the center of the city, Jinshin stopped and stared ahead. There was a flight of stairs completely condensed from sword chi there. It led straight to the sky, extending into the depths of the clouds. Quite a few people had gathered at the bottom of the stairs. From time to time, a few young geniuses would step onto the stairs resolutely with determination and burning desire. They wanted to work hard to reach the end. The stairs condensed from sword chi were known as the Path of Swords. It was said that the Path of Swords had already existed on the desolate plain for several 100,000 years. Moreover, its fame was not just limited to the desolate plain. It had even spread to other planes. This was because the Path of Swords was a test personally set down by the Celestial Sword Saint. It was said that once people reached the end of the Path of Swords, they would have the right to become the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple. On the other hand, the Celestial Sword Saint was known as a saint on the desolate plain. His strength was unquestionable. Jinshin remained before the Path of Swords for a very long time. He silently sensed the tremendous sword intent from the Path of Swords before leaving in the end. Before long, he arrived in the Radiant Saint Hall. "I want to join the Radiant Saint Hall," Jinshin directly stated his intentions. P.S. Do you want to see Shun Jian's heavy sword? Do you want to see Jinshin's 9-star sword of heavenly ways? Please follow Xiaoyao's public account on WeChat, Xingxingxiao110. Chapter 2280. This was only a branch of the Radiant Saint Hall. The people responsible for registering the new disciples were a few white-clothed women with a badge that only belonged to the Radiant Saint Hall on their chests. The women did not seem old, but from their appearances, the younger ones were only 16 or 17, while the older ones were only in their early 20s. All of them were young and beautiful, which was very pleasing to the eye. Of course, although they did not seem old, no one knew how long they had cultivated for. This is a test medallion. Record your information on the medallion, and then take the test with your medallion. The person who received Jinshin was a young woman who seemed to be 17 or 18. She took out a medallion that was 3 fingers wide and passed it to Jinshin with great familiarity. The medallion was forged from jade. Not only was it tough, but it also had the ability to store information. It could be used to record things through the senses of the soul. Jinshin took the medallion and directly made his way to where the test was to take place. When he arrived, over 100 Radiant Saint Masters had already gathered there. They were either nervous or filled with unease, waiting eagerly as they rubbed their hands in anticipation. Their gazes filled with various emotions, all gathered on the white pillar up ahead. That jade pillar was 10 feet tall and as thick as a water tank. It was covered with dense formation patterns, and it was unknown how many layers of formations had been inscribed on it. It gave off the feeling that this jade pillar was completely a carrier for a formation. The jade pillar was specially used to test the talent of Radiant Saint Masters. This was an important process that every disciple who wanted to join the Radiant Saint Hall had to go through. It was directly related to the future of every Radiant Saint Master. This was because the greater the tested talent, the greater the treatment and status they would receive after joining the Radiant Saint Hall would be. As long as they had a good starting point, their room for growth would obviously be even greater. Jiang Cheng, medium talent, Fei Narsi, low talent, Gudella, low talent, Exine Jiang, high talent. As the white jade pillar continued to flicker with varying degrees of light, the old man in charge of the test also continuously shouted out the aptitude grade of each of the testers. Jianshin also keenly discovered that those who were able to make the white jade pillar's light reach within 3 zhang were those with low aptitude. Those who were able to exceed 3 zhang were those with medium aptitude. Those who were able to exceed 6 zhang were those with high aptitude. Among the people who were tested here, most of them were of low or medium aptitude. High aptitudes were very rare. However, at that moment, the white jade pillar that was used to test one's talent suddenly blossomed with a dazzling light. At that moment, the light that shone from the white jade pillar actually reached a height of 90 feet. Moreover, it slowly rose another foot before stopping. In the end, the light stabilized at 90 feet and 1 foot, and its color was no longer monotonous white. Instead, it became multicolored. A 1-star genius. He's actually a genius of the opposite sex. Cries of surprise rang out from a crowd. The people gathered here all revealed looks of envy. Jianshin looked over as well. He saw a woman who seemed to be in her 20s standing before the white jade pillar. Her appearance was delicate and enchanting. Her large, black, gem-like eyes flickered as if they could speak. She wore the white robes that symbolized her status as a radiant Saint Master. She stared at the top of the white jade pillar, at the multicolored light that had only risen to a height of 90 feet. She frowned slightly, as if she was rather dissatisfied with the result. Baiyu, a 1-star genius. The old man in charge of the test finally smiled. He nodded towards Baiyu amicably and said, Baiyu, congratulations. From today onwards, you are a 1-star genius of the Radiant Saint Hall. Afterwards, Baiyu was taken away by a deacon in black robes. As long as they were tested as a genius, even if they were a 1-star genius of the lowest grade, they would be treated differently from regular disciples. Regular disciples, even those with great talent, would all wait here after the test. Only star geniuses would be taken to the Radiant Saint Hall by envoys. Following which, the test continued. After another dozen or so people were tested, the white jade pillar that was used to test one's aptitude finally erupted with an intense light once again. An intense white light, even more ferocious than when Baiyu was being tested, shot up to a height of 90 feet in an instant from the ground, causing the white jade pillar used for testing aptitude to blossom with a myriad of colors. However, this ray of light did not stop at a height of 91 feet like the white jade. Instead, it quickly surged to 91 feet, 92 feet. In the end, the multicolored light stopped at a height of 95 feet. It was close to the 6th foot. A 5-star genius. He's actually a 5-star genius. This time, the old man in charge of the test could not help but cry out. His face was filled with excitement. Whether it was the regular disciples who had finished their tests or the Radiant Saint Masters who were waiting to be tested, they all stared at the 5-star genius enviously. There were even quite a few women who showed undisguised admiration in their eyes. Even Jianshin could not help but glance over curiously. It was an extremely handsome young man around his age. He had already removed his hand from the pillar and stood there confidently with his hands behind his back. There was undisguised pride on his face. Zhuofeng, a 5-star genius. After sucking in a deep breath, the old man in charge of the test announced excitedly. Afterwards, another envoy in black robes took Zhuofeng away extremely politely. After Zhuofeng's departure, it was finally Jianshin's turn. Jianshin made his way over leisurely and passed the medallion to the old man. He stared at the 30-meter-tall pillar calmly. You're called Changyang, right? Place your hand on the testing rock and then use all your strength to condense Radiant Saint Force. You don't have to worry about the test results being lower if your Radiant Saint Master level is too low. The test stone only evaluates a person's talent. It has nothing to do with cultivation, the old man in charge of the test said to Jianshin. Thank you for your information, senior. I understand. Jianshin clasped his fist at the old man before looking at the pillar. After a moment of silence, he gently placed his hand on the rock and began to slowly condense Radiant Saint Force. Immediately, a white light rose up from the bottom of the pillar. It did not rise very quickly, but it was extremely steady. Very soon, it reached a height of 10 meters, then 20 meters. In the end, Jinshin's condensed Radiant Saint Force allowed the light to reach a height of 91 meters. 1-star genius. That's about enough. Jinshin paid attention to the light on the pillar at all times. After stabilizing a height of 91 feet, he secretly estimated it before acting like he was running out of energy and stopped. This was not where Jinshin's limit was. Jinshin had been purposefully suppressing himself during the test. After reaching the level of a 1-star genius, he stopped advancing. He understood that his identity was sensitive right now. He could not stand out too much in the Radiant Saint Hall and attract too much attention. All he needed was an identity that allowed him to cultivate in the Radiant Saint Hall. The identity of a 1-star genius just happened to be neither too high nor too low in the Radiant Saint Hall. It could satisfy his needs while not standing out too much. Changyang, 1-star genius. The old man in charge of the test announced excitedly. Discovering 3-star geniuses all of a sudden was quite the merit to him. Afterwards, Jinshin was also received by a black-robed envoy. He was taken to the Radiant Saint Hall. P.S. The 4 swords of the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt, namely the Sword of Mortality, Sword of Reincarnation, and Sword of Slaughter, are all renowned. The sword chi of the 4 swords is still sealed in the Anata Tower. If you want to see the true appearance of the 4 swords, follow Xiaoyao's official account on WeChat. You can find them in history. Chapter 2281. Jinshin was enveloped by the envoy's milky white light. He left the city at a very slow speed in Jinshin's eyes, shooting off into the distance. The envoy was clearly a hallowed Saint Master. He was emotionless and cold. He was silent, and he did not communicate with Jinshin at all. He only focused on taking Jinshin away. Jinshin said nothing either. He had already closed his eyes, silently sensing the envoy's usage and control of Radiant Saint Force. He was comprehending the mysteries behind it. Even though the envoy's cultivation was only equivalent to an early overgod, he was basically as insignificant as an ant before Jinshin, who could kill primordial realm experts. However, the envoy's comprehension of Radiant Saint Force was far greater than what Jinshin, who was only a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master, could compare to. As a result, there were many things that Jinshin could learn from the black-robed envoy. Very soon, Jinshin became completely submerged in his comprehension of Radiant Saint Force. After all, he was an expert who could take on primordial realm experts. He possessed a deep foundation. In the past, his Radiant Saint Force had remained at Class 9 because he had not found a way forward. At this moment, he was able to comprehend the black-robed envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force at such a close distance. To him, it was like he had seen a beacon of light in the dark night, allowing him to see a path forward in a single instance. Suddenly, a dazzling, milky white light flickered around Jinshin. It grew brighter and brighter, enveloping Jinshin like the sun in the sky. At the same time, extremely pure Radiant Saint Force origin energy gathered from all directions. In the end, it formed a vortex of energy that only Radiant Saint Masters could sense above Jinshin's head. Jinshin sucked in all the Radiant Saint Force origin energy like a whale. The soul core condensed from Radiant Saint Force origin energy that represented a Class 9. Radiant Saint Master rapidly revolved in Jinshin's head. It strengthened at an extremely terrifying rate, undergoing a qualitative change. In the end, the pure white soul core became scarlet. It hovered silently in Jinshin's head, shining with a faint red light. It seemed like a scarlet flower. He's actually broken through at a time like this. It looks like this kid's talent is quite impressive. The envoy who escorted Jinshin glanced at Jinshin in surprise as he sighed in amazement inside. However, it was very clear that even though Jinshin had broken through, his strength was still nothing in the envoy's eyes. As a result, his breakthrough did not raise too much attention from the envoy. He wondered if the envoy would still be able to remain so composed once he learned that Jinshin was an expert who could kill primordial realm experts. The 7 colors of the soul core correspond to the 3 origin realm experts and the 4 godhood experts. My soul core is scarlet right now, which means that I've officially broken through the 9th class and reached the 10th class as a Radiant Saint Master, Jinshin thought. He had never thought that his Radiant Saint Force would make a breakthrough before he had even reached the Radiant Saint Hall. Moreover, he had not practiced any cultivation method. He had only found the right direction based on the envoy's usage of Radiant Saint Force. He had used this opportunity to break through. He could not help but be filled with eagerness. He had no idea how his cultivation as a Radiant Saint Master would soar at an astonishing rate once he obtained a high-grade cultivation method from the Radiant Saint Hall. After all, he was different from ordinary people. Although he seemed like a Radiant Saint Master who had just reached the 10th class, he was secretly a fighter with a powerful soul. We're here. This is the Radiant Saint Hall. At this moment, the envoy stopped and said to Jinshin. Jinshin raised his head and looked over. He discovered that he had already arrived in a mountain range that was extremely abundant with Radiant Saint Force. Stone huts and dwellings could be seen everywhere between the mountains. White-robed Radiant Saint Masters moved about everywhere. They flew in the surroundings, enveloped by a dense layer of white light. They seemed like immortals. Jinshin only glanced over the mountain range casually before suddenly raising his head. He stared into the distance. With his eyesight, he could clearly make out a colossal divine hall that stood above the clouds 1,000,000 kilometers away. It shone with dazzling, pure white light that illuminated the surroundings, enveloping the boundless mountains. The entire temple was incomparably pure and holy. There was an invisible aura that gave people a feeling of holiness. This is the outer mountains of our Radiant Saint Hall. A few disciples with ordinary talent and weak strength gather here. You're a 1-star genius, so you have a right to directly enter the inner mountains and become a disciple of a divine king of Radiant Saint Hall. Every single divine king of Radiant Saint Hall possesses the title of Protector. In the past 10 years, Protector Han has been in charge of all the new star geniuses. I'll take you to Protector Han's territory. In the future, you can properly cultivate under Protector Han. If your performance is outstanding, you might have the right to enter the Sacred Hall to cultivate. The envoy explained to Jinshin. As soon as he mentioned the Sacred Hall, he could not help but yearn. The envoy brought Jinshin to a mountain peak in the inner mountains before leaving alone. On the mountain peak, Jinshin discovered that there were 2 other people waiting for him as well. He was familiar with the 2 of them. They were the 2 other star geniuses who had joined the Radiant Saint Hall on the same day as him. They were the 1-star genius, Baiyu, and the 5-star genius, Shuofeng. You're a star genius as well? Can you tell us what star genius you are? Baiyu and Shuofeng both studied Jinshin's arrival. Baiyu stared at Jinshin with shining eyes as she asked curiously. I've barely managed to squeeze into the ranks of 1-star geniuses. Jinshin waved the token of authority in his hand and said indifferently, What color has your soul core reached? Shuofeng asked. There was undisguised arrogance on his face, as if he was talking to Jinshin like he was superior. In the Saint's world, there was no such thing as Class 10 or 11 for Radiant Saint Masters. It was all determined by the color of the soul core. I've only just condensed the first color. Jinshin did not care about Shuofeng's attitude. He replied indifferently. He was not a fighter right now, but a weak Radiant Saint Master. You've only condensed the first color? Then I'm more powerful than you. I've already condensed the second color. Senior Shuofeng is the most powerful. He's already reached the peak of 3 colors. If nothing goes wrong, Senior Shuofeng should be our first senior brother, and I'll be your second senior sister. As for you, you'll obviously be our junior brother. Junior brother, what's your name? All right, call me second senior sister. Baiyu was lively and cheerful. She giggled at Jinshin. Chapter 2282. Jinshin looked at Baiyu rather speechlessly. He said, Do you really want to be the senior sister that much? Moreover, it's probably still too early to say that you're my senior sister. Baiyu rolled her eyes at Jianshun and said rather complacently, "It's not that I want to be your senior sister, but it's just that I'm stronger than you. As a result, I can only accept you as my junior brother reluctantly. Little junior brother, why don't you call me senior sister as soon as possible? If you make senior sister happy, senior sister will protect you in the future. If anyone bullies you, feel free to come and find senior sister." Towards the end, Baiyu pretended to be heroic. It was just that when such a spirit appeared on her face, no matter how one looked at it, it was a bit out of place. Jianshun could not help but laugh. Did he really need the protection of a radiant Saint Master who is only a returnance? Of course, if there's an enemy that even senior sister can't stop, there's still first senior brother, right? Senior Zhuofeng, don't you think so? Baiyu turned to look at Zhuofeng and giggled. She seemed extremely lively. Junior sister is right. If any ignorant person offends junior sister in the future, feel free to come find me. I'll stand up for you. Zhuofeng smiled like the sun. He looked at Baiyu in a friendly manner. As for Jianshun, Zhuofeng did not even glance at him, as if he did not take Jianshun seriously at all. Zhuofeng, Baiyu, Changyang, come to the top of the mountain as quickly as you can. At this moment, a heavy voice rang out from the sky. Jianshun, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng all looked at the top of the mountain. They all understood that the person who had spoken was extremely likely to be their teacher. Baiyu and Zhuofeng immediately became cautious. A radiant divine king possessed a certain level of intimidation in their eyes. Baiyu and Zhuofeng did not dare to tarry. As soon as they heard the voice, they both condensed radiant saint force, wanting to fly towards the top of the mountain. However, as soon as the two of them condensed radiant saint force, they discovered in surprise that their bodies had been restrained by an invisible force. They were unable to fly at all. However, the two of them immediately understood that this was most likely a test given to them by their future teacher. They immediately made up their minds, gritted their teeth, and began to fly towards the mountain peak. Jianshun's expression was as calm as water. His eyes stared at the top of the mountain for a moment. Soon after, his figure flashed as he followed behind Baiyu and Zhuofeng. He unhurriedly chased them all the way to the top of the mountain. At the same time, an azure streak of light shot over from the depths of outer space with unbelievable speed. It was heading towards the vast piece of land that hovered in outer space. In the end, the azure streak of light did not enter the desolate plain. Instead, it stopped in the sea of stars and turned into an azure-robed man. The man was the renowned heavenly king of azure brilliance, the Azure Peng King. It's actually on the desolate plain. The Azure Peng King concealed his presence as he hovered in the sea of stars. He stared at the desolate plain sternly as he frowned. I can't wait any longer. The solitary sword ancestor is about to come. I have to get the Inata Tower from Jianshun before he does, even if I have to pay a price, thought the Azure Peng King. The Azure Peng King thought before making up his mind. He carefully concealed his presence and approached the desolate plain silently in an extremely low-key manner. Piss off. However, at this moment, a booming voice boomed in outer space. In the next moment, extremely powerful laws of the way of the sword condensed in outer space. In a single instance, it formed an extremely huge strand of sword chi, radiating with sword chi as it appeared in the sea of stars. The strand of sword chi was over 100,000 kilometers long. It was truly huge. From afar, it seemed like a resplendent silver river, shining with dazzling light and illuminating outer space. Afterwards, it directly slashed towards the Azure Peng King. As the sword slashed out, the starlight in the sky shook as if countless stars were falling. The terrifying sword chi cleaved space in half. It was extremely terrifying. The Azure Peng King's face changed. He did not take the attack head-on. Azure light flickered around him as he used his speed, retreating 10 million kilometers in a single instance as a blur, dodging the attack of the sword chi. Celestial Sword Saint, I don't want to come into conflict with you. The murderer of my disciple is on the desolate plain right now. I only want to capture the murderer of my beloved disciple, so I hope you won't interfere, the Azure Peng King growled coldly. Humph. I don't care what your reasons are. Anyway, if you want to set foot on the desolate plain, you're welcome to try. The celestial sword saint's voice rang out from outer space. It was cold and filled with heavy, killing intent. The azure Pung King hovered in the distance as he stared at the desolate plain up ahead. His face was uneasy. However, he did not take a single step forward in the end. Before long, the space around the azure Pung King suddenly twisted. A huge crack suddenly appeared, and the solitary sword ancestor charged out from the spatial crack while seated on the meteor. The huge meteor stopped near the azure Pung King. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the desolate plain before standing up. He clasped his fist in the direction of the desolate plain and said, "Celestial Sword Saint, it has been many years since we last met. How have you been?" "Solitary Sword, you've actually come as well. You can come over, but this azure bird is forbidden from taking a single step on the desolate plain," the Celestial Sword Saint said firmly. He showed no respect to the azure Pung King at all. The mighty heavenly king of azure brilliance had actually been called an azure bird. The azure Pung King's face immediately darkened from anger. His face was terrifyingly sunken. The solitary sword ancestor clasped his fist at the sword chi. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he stepped off the meteor and was about to enter the desolate plain. However, at this moment, the solitary sword ancestor's face changed. He suddenly looked behind him. A white-robed, middle-aged man strolled through the vast sea of stars behind him. He could cross a huge distance with every step, directly hurrying towards the solitary sword ancestor. In just a few seconds, the middle-aged man arrived a few kilometers away from the solitary sword ancestor. "You seem to have specially come for me? Do you need me for something?" The solitary sword ancestor stopped on the cloud plain. He turned around and looked at the white-robed, middle-aged man. He frowned slightly. The azure Pung King also noticed the middle-aged man, but he only glanced at him before losing interest. This was because the middle-aged man was just too weak. He did not take him seriously at all. "It said that you've been hunting down Jianshun everywhere." The middle-aged man looked at the solitary sword ancestor calmly and said with composure, "The only successor of my solitary sword lineage has been killed by Jianshun," the solitary sword ancestor said sternly. "I've come looking for you for two reasons. Firstly, I hope you can give up on hunting down Jianshun," the middle-aged man said. He remained calm the entire time. The azure Pung King became furious when he heard that, but he did not lose his temper on the spot. He could tell that the middle-aged man was anything but simple. He turned to the solitary sword ancestor secretly and asked, "Who is this? He's a mere 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, yet he dares to speak to you like that?" Chapter 2283. The azure Pung King's face immediately sank when he heard the solitary sword ancestor's cautious message. Without a doubt, the solitary sword ancestor was telling him that the middle-aged man, who was only a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime in his eyes, possessed an extremely powerful body. He was so powerful that even a peak expert like the solitary sword ancestor had to be cautious. Originally, the middle-aged man had nothing to do with the azure Pung King, but the middle-aged man just happened to want to protect Jianshun, who the azure Pung King had already given the order to kill. This immediately made the azure Pung King's face become rather ugly. The solitary sword ancestor fell silent when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He stared at the white-clothed, resolute middle-aged man emotionlessly, and only after quite a while did he say, "You know just how difficult it is to find a suitable successor for our solitary sword lineage. Gong Zheng was the only successor that the old man found in the vast saint's world after so much difficulty. Yet in the end, he was slain by Jianshun in Poseidon Palace before he had even fully grown up. If you want to protect Jianshun, how am I supposed to explain this to the past generations of our solitary sword lineage?" The middle-aged man in white smiled faintly and said, "Finding a suitable successor is an extremely difficult matter for you. But for me, it's not a problem." The solitary sword ancestor's eyes narrowed when he heard that. He immediately stared at the middle-aged man with shining eyes, and a sliver of eagerness appeared on his face. He said, "Are you willing to find a suitable successor for me?" The middle-aged man nodded. "I'm not looking for one for you. I've already found one. There are 3 juniors with outstanding talent who are extremely suitable to become successors of your solitary sword lineage. 3? Really? The solitary sword ancestor's face lit up as his eyes lit up. You know whether I'm telling the truth or not. Absolute sword. I will use these 3 successors in exchange for you to withdraw your bounty on Jianshan. Furthermore, you will not continue to target Jianshan from now on. Are you willing? The middle-aged man said indifferently. All right, I'll beat you. If the 3 of them successfully become successors of my solitary sword lineage, not only will I stop targeting Jianshan, but I'll even owe you a huge favor, the solitary sword ancestor said loudly. His voice was filled with excitement. It was extremely difficult to find a successor for the solitary sword lineage. Even in the most glorious history of the solitary sword lineage, there had never been more than 10 successors. In his generation, there was only one successor, Gongzheng. As a result, the solitary sword ancestor was naturally overjoyed when he suddenly received news of 3 successors. You said you came looking for me for 2 matters. What's the second matter? The solitary sword ancestor asked again. The second thing is that I want you to do it personally, the middle-aged man said. You want me to do it personally? The solitary sword ancestor was surprised. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said to the solitary sword ancestor secretly, My original body is trapped. I need you to do it personally and break through the seal. The solitary sword ancestor immediately became stern. He stared at the middle-aged man deeply with his ancient eyes. After a very long moment of silence, he nodded slowly. The middle-aged man's face did not change at all when he saw the solitary sword ancestor agree. He remained calm and composed the entire time. With a wave of his hand, a piece of jade directly shot into the solitary sword ancestor's hand. He said, These are the locations of your 3 successors. Afterwards, the middle-aged man no longer remained. He took a step and left, entering the desolate plain with composure. He did not even glance at the Azure Pung King as if he was nothing. Solitary sword. Who is he? The Azure Pung King arrived before the solitary sword ancestor with a flash and asked with a sunken face after the middle-aged man's departure. The solitary sword ancestor shook his head gently. He did not seem to be willing to talk too much about this person's identity. However, he opened his mouth. He wanted to remind the Azure Pung King to give up on pursuing Jianshan, but when he thought of the Azure Pung King's personality, he knew that even if he reminded the Azure Pung King, he would not be able to change the Azure Pung King's mind. In the end, he said nothing. He held the jade slip that recorded the 3 successors and left rather eagerly with excitement and eagerness. The Azure Pung King's face became uneasy as he watched the solitary sword ancestor leave. He stared at the desolate plain that hovered in outer space as the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he was still unwilling to just watch Jianshan hide on the desolate plain safely. He called out in outer space, Celestial Sword Saint, the grievances of the past are already in the past. It has already been so many years, so why do you still hold on to it? If you let me enter the desolate plain for 2 hours, I, the heavenly king of azure brilliance, will definitely repay you with great gifts. Ha ha! If we're talking about holding on to grudges, just how many people in the entire Saints world can compare to you, Azure Bird? Azure Bird, I'll say it again. If you want to set foot on the desolate plain, you're welcome to try, the Celestial Sword Saint replied. His voice was filled with threat and provocation. He was nowhere to be seen, but his voice boomed through outer space like a great bell. The Azure Pung King's face darkened. He glanced in the direction of the desolate plain coldly before turning around and leaving with a cold snort. However, he did not go very far. Instead, he sat down on a meteor in outer space and observed Jianshan from afar. Jianshan, I like to see just how long you can remain on the desolate plain. The Azure Pung King thought as he stared at the fingernail-sized desolate plain in outer space. Jianshan, Baiyu, and Zhuofeng all unleashed their full strength in the Radiant Saint Hall, charging towards the peak of the mountain. They moved extremely quickly, where they seemed like 3 streaks of white light. With a flash, they vanished into the forest. Zhuofeng was the strongest out of the three of them. He had already condensed a three-colored soul core. He bathed in milky white radiant saint force as he ran at the very front. After him was Baiyu, who had condensed a two-colored soul core. Jianshan was last. In reality, with Jianshan's current cultivation, he could completely ignore the suppression of the mysterious power and reach the peak of the mountain in a single step. However, he was only a radiant saint master who had just condensed a one-colored soul core. As a result, the strength he displayed was completely at the level of a one-colored soul core. However, even with that being the case, the strength he displayed was not something a radiant saint force with a one-colored soul core could compare to. As he flew, he gradually closed the distance between him and Baiyu. And this was under the premise that Jianshan was holding back. He did not want to stand out too much. Otherwise, he could have surpassed Baiyu and Zhuofeng very easily. In the end, Zhuofeng was the first to reach the top of the mountain. Jianshan sped up slightly at the last moment, so he was a step ahead of Baiyu and became second. As a result, Baiyu, who should have been second, ended up third. Junior brother, I really couldn't tell. You're actually even faster than senior sister. Baiyu stared at Jianshan as she panted slightly. Very good. Since everyone's here, I formally announce that Zhuofeng, Changyang, and Baiyu will be my students from today onwards. I will be guiding you on the path of cultivation as Radiant Saint Masters in the future, Jianshan said. A white-robed, middle-aged man stood before the three of them. He seemed scholarly and rather scholarly, but his eyes shone brightly as he spoke to Jianshan, Baiyu, and Baiyu. From today onwards, Zhuofeng will be the first senior brother. Changyang, you will be the second senior brother, and Baiyu, you will be the junior sister, Han Xian said firmly. How did I become the youngest? No, teacher, this isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. I should be second, so why am I last? Baiyu refused to accept this. Teacher, I have a two-colored soul core, while junior Changyang has only just condensed a one-colored soul core. I have no objections to senior Zhuofeng being first, but why are you making junior Changyang, who's weaker than me, be ranked before me? This is clearly unfair. Han Xian stared at Baiyu and said, Who told you that the higher your cultivation, the higher your rank? Isn't that the case? Baiyu pouted and said matter-of-factly. Her face was filled with resentment. Here, whoever reaches the peak first will be ranked first. Zhuofeng reached the peak first, so he's the first senior brother. Changyang came before you, so he's second. You're last, so you're naturally third, Han Xian said firmly. Then he waved his hand and said, Enough. This matter has been decided, so there's no need for you to say anything more. The three of you can go find a place to set up your dwelling as a place to cultivate. Come see me tomorrow morning. Remember, the location of the dwelling cannot exceed my territory. After saying this, Han Xian did not even look at Baiyu's mournful face and directly left. Chapter 2284. No, Changyang, we have to switch. I'm your second senior sister, and you're my third junior brother. Baiyu turned to Changyang. Baiyu said to Jianshan. She glared at him and purposefully put on a stern face. She seemed to be threatening him. Jianshan could not help but smile. He said, That's not something the two of us can decide. If junior sister still refuses to accept it, we can only go find teacher Han Xian. With that, Jianshan left and made his way down the mountain. Who's your junior sister? Changyang. You're not allowed to call me that in the future, Baiyu bellowed out furiously as if she had been greatly wronged. She was unhappy. Afterwards, Jianshan found a quiet place halfway up the mountain and dug out a cave. It would be his dwelling in the future. The location he chose was very inconspicuous. Not only was it remote, but it was also covered in weeds. The entrance to the dwelling was half hidden, so it seemed extremely well hidden. As a dwelling, it naturally needed defensive formations. However, it was not suitable for Jianshan to cast down formations of overly high grade here. As a result, he found a few formation discs of very low grade from a space ring and placed them at the entrance of the dwelling as protective formations. In just 6 hours, Jianshan finished setting up the simple dwelling. Afterwards, he sat down in the center of the dwelling and began to consider his future plans. I can't stay in the Radiant Saint Hall for too long. My main objective here is to obtain the cultivation method of Hallowed Saint Masters. Once I obtain it, I'll leave immediately. Jinshin secretly made up his mind. He had already thought of a plan to deal with the threat from the Azure Pung King. Since the Azure Pung King could not set foot on the desolate plain, he did not need to worry about him at all. If I leave the desolate plain in the future, I'll directly go to the heavenly palace of Bishing on the Prosper Plain and return the Inata Tower to them. Then, I'll ask the experts of the heavenly palace of Bishing to suppress the Azure Pung King. The only problem is the solitary sword ancestor. If the solitary sword ancestor sets foot on the desolate plain, I can only attempt the path of swords, Jinshin thought. Although he had already changed his appearance and was no longer using his original appearance, his disguise was completely useless before an expert like the solitary sword ancestor. It was completely useless. The celestial sword saint has set up the path of swords on the desolate plain. It said that once you reach the end of the path, you have the right to accept the celestial sword ancestor as your master. I don't know what level of cultivation the celestial sword saint has reached, but from what I've heard, it's not difficult to tell that the celestial sword saint is an extremely terrifying existence on the desolate plain. He shouldn't be weaker than the solitary sword ancestor. If there's no other choice, I'll try the path of swords. However, challenging the path of swords similarly carries an enormous risk. Unless there's no other choice, you must not step onto this path. This is because I'm not completely confident that I can hide the existence of the sword spirits from an expert like the celestial sword saint with my current level of cultivation. As his cultivation increased, Jinshin's ability to hide the sword spirits became better and better. After all, he had already reached the major achievement of the chaotic body. Unless he encountered a peak expert whose cultivation far exceeded his, it would be impossible for them to see through his deepest secrets with a single glance. Before long, Jinshin dismissed his thoughts. He used the remaining time to consolidate his soul core that he had just broken through. Cultivation was non-existent, so he could not sense the flow of time at all. As a result, when Jinshin roused from his cultivation, it was already noon the next day. It was far past the time that Han Xin had told the three of them to gather at the top of the mountain the next morning. Looking at the sky, Jinshin frowned slightly. He left the dwelling and only used the strength of a one-colored soul core as he flew towards the top of the mountain. Very soon, Jinshin arrived at the top of the mountain. He discovered Zhuofeng and Baiyu seated on the ground. They were enveloped by a layer of milky white radiant saint force. Clearly, they had already entered a state of cultivation. Han Xin stood with his hands behind his back. He had his back towards the two of them as he stared at the radiant Saint Hall that hovered above the clouds in the distance in a daze. Yearning appeared in the depths of his eyes. Changyang, why are you late on the first day? Han Xin asked with his back towards Jinshin. He spoke very indifferently. Teacher, I only broke through to a one-colored soul core yesterday. When I was consolidating my cultivation in the dwelling, I lost track of time, so I only woke up earlier. Jinshin clasped his fist and replied calmly. Yes, Han Xin gently replied. Han Xin nodded gently. He did not look back at Jinshin, nor did he continue to fuss over Jinshin's lateness. He asked, do you know what Radiant Saint Force is? Jinshin was surprised when he heard that. He thought Han Xin was going to criticize him for being late, but he had never thought that nothing would happen in the end. After a moment of thought, Jinshin said, Radiant Saint Force. To put it simply, it's a power that only Radiant Saint Masters can sense. It's not particularly offensive, but it possesses very great healing abilities. It can even bring people back to life. It's extremely wondrous. If you want to make it a little more complicated, Radiant Saint Force is one of the 3,000 ways that make up this world and support its operation. You're right. Radiant Saint Force is actually one of the 3,000 laws. Then do you know what's the difference between Hallowed Saint Masters and Radiant Saint Masters? Han Xin continued to ask. This time, Jinshin hesitated for a while before answering, I don't know much about Hallowed Saint Masters, nor do I understand much about them. I only know that Hallowed Saint Masters have grasped another law. They can transform Radiant Saint Force, making it extremely powerful even though it originally did not possess great offensive abilities. Its offensive abilities are no weaker than the laws known to be the strongest out of the 3,000 ways. Jianshun had not come into contact with hallowed Saint Masters much. He had only come into contact with Xianming, so his knowledge of hallowed Saint Masters was extremely limited. Han Xian finally returned to his senses. He stared at Jianshun with brimming interest and said, "Chongyang, you're right about everything else, but you're wrong about one thing. The laws grasped by hallowed Saint Masters are not weaker than the laws known to be the strongest out of the 3,000 ways. Instead, they're even more powerful than these laws. Do you know why?" Before Jianshun could reply, Han Xian continued, "That's because the laws grasped by hallowed Saint Masters are not just the power of laws. There's also the power of our souls. This law is known as the laws of the hallowed." "The power of the soul," Jianshun murmured. The term soul was both familiar and unfamiliar to him because the soul was the original form of the soul. Many years ago, the world he had come into contact with only used the term soul. Very few people use the term soul. "Look carefully. This is the laws of the hallowed." Han Xian slowly raised his hand, and a dazzling, white light gradually condensed in his hand. It was the laws of the hallowed. Jianshun stared at the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand closely. The first time he had seen the laws of the hallowed was from Xianming, so this was the second time he had seen it. However, the second time he saw the laws of the hallowed was completely different from the first time he saw it from Xianming. This was because Xianming had used the laws of the hallowed to attack back then. He had completely demonstrated the brutal and sharp side of the laws of the hallowed. He had only used it for an extremely short amount of time, so Jianshun did not have much time to comprehend its mysteries. However, the laws of the hallowed condensed in Han Xian's hand gave Jianshun a much gentler feeling. At the same time, Han Xian had purposefully slowed down the speed at which he condensed the laws of the hallowed. Not only did that allow Jianshun to sense the mysteries of the laws of the hallowed more clearly, but also gave him plenty of time to comprehend it. Jianshun could not help but close his eyes. At that moment, he felt like his soul had flown out of his body and fused with the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand. In this state, he could clearly sense all the mysteries of the laws of the hallowed. He could sense every single change in the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand. At that moment, Jianshun even had the misconception that he had become the laws of the hallowed in Han Xian's hand. They were completely inseparable. P.S. Does anyone still remember Tianmu Ling, who Jianshun met on the Tianyuan continent? Does anyone still remember one of Jianshun's wives, Huang Wan? Now, the pictures of the two women have been posted. If you want to see them, please follow Xiaoyao's WeChat account and reply to his messages. You'll find them. Chapter 2285. Unknowingly, Jianshun had already sat down. Milky white radiant saint force enveloped him as well. He had already gathered the radiant saint force in the surroundings without knowing it. As a result, he seemed exactly the same as Baiyu and Zhuofeng right now. They had all entered a state of cultivation. However, unlike Baiyu and Zhuofeng were comprehending the mysteries of the laws of the hallowed with great difficulty. On the other hand, Jianshun's comprehension of the laws of the hallowed rapidly increased. As his comprehension rapidly deepened, Jianshun's knowledge and understanding of the laws of the hallowed became greater and greater, as if he was about to reach the threshold of comprehending the laws of the hallowed. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was already evening. Only when the sun set and the red glow filled the sky did the three of them wake up. "Teacher, the laws of the hallowed are just too profound and too profound. I've comprehended the laws of the hallowed for an entire day, but I haven't made any progress at all," Baiyu pouted as she said in frustration. Han Xian smiled when he heard that. He said, "In reality, I didn't expect you to grasp the laws of the hallowed immediately. Let alone you. Even 9-star geniuses won't be able to grasp the laws of the hallowed after seeing it once at your level of cultivation. My true intentions are just for you to see the door to becoming a hallowed Saint Master beforehand, paving the way for your future. I only hope that it'll be easier for you to become a hallowed Saint Master in the future. Teacher, is it very difficult to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed Saint Master? Jinshin asked. Han Xian nodded. It is indeed quite difficult. If a radiant Saint Master wants to comprehend the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed Saint Master, it's no less difficult than breaking through to godhood from reciprocity. It might even be more difficult. In our Radiant Saint Hall, basically all Radiant Saint Masters with 3 colored soul cores can become hallowed Saint Masters after a very long time. There are even some Radiant Saint Masters who can only truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed after condensing 4 colored soul cores. Of course, all of this is based on a person's talent. Some prodigies with unprecedented talent have already comprehended the laws of the hallowed before they had even condensed a 3-colored soul core. If your talent is insufficient, even if you condense a 7-colored soul core and become a radiant divine king, you will not be fated to become a hallowed Saint Master. In the end, Han Xian looked at Zhuo Feng and said, Zhuo Feng, you're a 5-star genius, and you have a 3-colored soul core. Have you gained anything? Clearly, Han Xian still had very high hopes for Zhuo Feng. Zhuo Feng did not reply immediately. After a moment of thought, he said, Teacher, I feel like I've gained something, but I still need some time before I can truly comprehend the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian nodded in satisfaction. He said, I hope you can become a hallowed Saint Master when you condense a 3-colored soul core. I will work hard. I definitely won't disappoint you, Zhuo Feng said confidently. These are the cultivation insights I've tidied up. Although they're not particularly valuable, they'll be of some help to the 3 of you right now. There's also a cultivation method that can directly allow you to condense a 4-colored soul core. Take it and study it. Of course, the quality of the cultivation method is rather ordinary. It's only suitable for Radiant Saint Masters with 4-colored soul cores. It's just enough for the 3 of you right now. Han Xian took out a few new books and passed them to Jinshin, Baiyu, and Zhuo Feng. Teacher, may I ask how I can obtain higher-level cultivation methods? Jinshin asked. Cultivation methods that could only allow him to condense a 4-colored soul core were nowhere near enough for him. Higher-level cultivation methods can only be obtained from the Tower of Radiance in the Sacred Hall. However, you don't have the right to enter the Tower of Radiance right now. All right, that's all for today. You're dismissed. Han Xian waved his hand and left. Junior brother, you sure are bold to be late on the first day. Tell me, how did teacher punish you? Baiyu stared at Jinshin with her mischievous eyes as soon as the solder left. She asked curiously, How impudent. I'm your second senior brother. You're the junior sister, Jinshin said in annoyance. Your cultivation is weaker than mine, so of course you can only be my little junior brother. Unless your cultivation surpasses mine, don't even think about making me acknowledge you as my second senior brother. Baiyu snorted gently in feigned arrogance. Zhuo Feng could not help but frown when he saw how Baiyu was behaving. He said, Junior sister, I've already comprehended the laws of the hallowed. Come to the moon's viewing cliff tonight when the moon rises. We can exchange our experiences with the laws of the hallowed. Baiyu obviously understood that Zhuo Feng was passing on his experience with the laws of the hallowed to her. Her eyes immediately lit up, and she agreed excitedly. All right. I'll see you at the moon's viewing cliff tonight. Junior brother, you have to come. Don't be late again. Junior brother Chang Yang only has a 1-colored soul core right now. There's still some distance before you can come in contact with the laws of the hallowed. You won't necessarily benefit even if you come. Instead, it'll delay your cultivation. Junior brother Chang Yang, cultivate well first. Once you reach the level of a 2-colored soul core, I'll pass on my experiences to you, Zhuo Feng said immediately. He clearly wanted to reject Jinshin's invitation to the moon's viewing cliff. Thank you for your good intentions, senior brother, but I really do need a peaceful environment to cultivate. I can't be delayed by other matters. Jinshin smiled in an unconcerned manner before turning around and leaving. Before long, Jinshin returned to his extremely crude dwelling covered in weeds. He directly sat down and began to comprehend the laws of the hallowed again. For hours later, Jinshin's eyes snapped open. He slowly raised his hand, and immediately, a white energy with a tough and brutal presence condensed in his hand. To no surprise, the energy was the laws of the hallowed. Han Xian's evolution of the laws of the hallowed was like a beacon in the dark night to Jinshin. It guided him in a direction, allowing him to grasp the laws of the hallowed. As a result, after calming down and comprehending once more, he basically did not spend much time to truly grasp the laws of the hallowed and become a hallowed Saint Master. Han Xian said that most Radiant Saint Masters only become hallowed Saint Masters with 3-colored or 4-colored soul cores. While I became a hallowed Saint Master with a 1-colored soul core, Jinshin murmured as he looked at the laws of the hallowed condensed in his hand. Becoming a hallowed Saint Master with a 1-colored soul core is something that hasn't appeared in the Radiant Saint Hall for 1,000,000 years. Not bad, not bad. Jinshin, your talent really is extraordinary. Even I am surprised. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out from behind Jinshin. Jinshin's face immediately changed drastically from the sudden voice. He shot up from the ground instinctively and turned around. He looked behind him in shock. Even though he was cultivating, he still maintained some vigilance toward the outside world. However, he did not notice at all that someone had silently appeared in his dwelling while he was cultivating. Behind Jinshin, a white-robed, middle-aged man with a resolute face stood there silently. He was like a ball of air, without any presence at all. With Jinshin's soul and senses, he was unable to sense his existence. He could only see him with his eyes. However, when Jinshin saw the middle-aged man's appearance, he became stunned. Disbelief filled his face. "Who are you?" Jinshin asked in surprise. His emotions were in turmoil, and he struggled to remain calm. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Who am I? I'm sure you already know the answer in your heart. Senior Mo Tianyun, is it really you?" Jinshin softly cried out. He was rather stunned. He felt like he was dreaming. This was because the middle-aged man was the main character of a great legend that had been passed down for 1,000,000 years on the Tian Yuan continent. Mo Tianyun. Both Shui Yunlan and Xiao Ling wanted to find Mo Tianyun as soon as possible. However, the Saint's world was so vast. Finding a single person here was easier said than done. It was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack. But he never would have thought that at this very moment, Mo Tianyun would actually appear here in a very strange manner. Moreover, he was in his own cultivation cave. How did Mo Tianyun find him? Moreover, he was not using his original appearance right now. Instead, it was a completely unfamiliar face. How did Mo Tianyun recognize him with a single glance? Moreover, this was the territory of the Radiant Saint Hall. Did Mo Tianyun belong to the Radiant Saint Hall now that he had suddenly appeared here?